Welcome to the Fantasy Audiobook. The God of Ice and Fire at Hogwarts. Chapter 81. After leaving Dumbledore's principal's office, Lynn looked very preoccupied. After he learned that his father was once a member of the Order of the Phoenix, he had a hard time deciding his attitude towards the Order of the Phoenix. Originally, Lynn was indifferent to organizations like the Order of the Phoenix. In Lynn's view, most of the actions of the Order of the Phoenix against Voldemort were small group operations. They were not able to mobilize the resistance of ordinary wizards like Grindelwald back then. Raise the flag of resistance. Relatively speaking, the Order of the Phoenix acted like some stubborn losers. They could not stop Voldemort and could only cause more casualties to themselves. If Harry's mother hadn't used blood magic and love to protect Harry and bounce back Voldemort's killing curse, I am afraid that the British wizarding world would have been ruled by Voldemort long ago. However, after learning that his father was once a member of the Order of the Phoenix, the relationship between Lynn, a descendant of a member of the Order of the Phoenix, and the Order of the Phoenix became subtle. It doesn't matter, first make good use of everything that can be used today to enhance my magical strength, so that by then, whether it is Voldemort or the Order of the Phoenix, I will have a choice. Lynn shook his head, as if trying to clear away his distracting thoughts. Lynn returned to the Slytherin dormitory. After defeating Voldemort, he still had many things to do, such as replenishing the forbidden fire consumed by Voldemort's remnant soul, and re-refining a power capable of carrying the Sorcerer's Stone, an alchemical device that uses the Philosopher's Stone as the source of magic power for Lynn's spells. On the other side, Irina and Ron sent Harry and Hermione to the school hospital. Hermione was hit by Quirrell's coma spell and was not seriously injured, so she woke up on the way to the school hospital. However, Madame Pomfrey at the school hospital did not let Hermione leave, but carefully checked Hermione's body with magic, and then asked Hermione to stay in the school hospital for a day of observation. Although Harry was not attacked, when Voldemort's remnant soul left Quirrell's body, the impact of the remnant soul's malice on Harry's bloodline protection magic slightly affected Harry's soul, which made Harry be in school. I was in coma for 3 whole days before I woke up in the hospital. The day after Harry woke up, it was Hogwarts' end-of-year party. During these few days, Lynn refined part of the forbidden fires. Of course, these forbidden fires were far inferior to those consumed by 2/3 of Voldemort's remnant souls. If he wanted to replenish his inventory, Lynn would probably have to spend 3 days and 3 nights refining it without sleep. As for refining the alchemical products used to carry the power of the magic stone, it takes at least 7 days. In the auditorium, Lynn was sitting calmly at the long Slytherin table. On his right was the trio of Malfoys who were doing nothing, while the 4 of Irina were sitting at the Gryffindor long table. Together, waiting for the dinner to begin. At this time, the Great Hall was decorated in green and silver, representing Slytherin, to celebrate Slytherin House winning the House Cup for 7 consecutive years. A moment later, Dumbledore came to the auditorium and delivered his speech to the students. After delivering his speech, Dumbledore must announce the winner of the Academy Cup before the year-end banquet can officially begin. Now, as far as I know, we must first have the House Cup Awards ceremony. The specific scores of each house are as follows. 4th place, Hufflepuff, 352 points. 3rd place, Gryffindor, 389 points. 3rd place, Gryffindor, 389 points. 2nd place, Ravenclaw, 426 points. 1st place, Slytherin, 572 points. Dumbledore said loudly. During this school year, Irina earned more than 100 points for Gryffindor, but in the Fire Dragon incident, Gryffindor deducted 50 points more than in the original book, so Gryffindor's final score it was 389, which was 77 points higher than the 312 points in the original book. At least it helped Gryffindor get rid of its bottom position. Similarly, because Irina burned Charlie's letter, Malfoy did not cause trouble in the Fire Dragon incident. In the end, Slytherin was not deducted 50 points because of Malfoy, so Slytherin's score was 5 higher than in the original book. 10 points, plus Lynn also earned more than 100 points for Slytherin this school year, which brought Slytherin's score to an astonishing 572 points, a full 146 points higher than the second-placed Ravenclaw. Point. It seems that even Lao Dang can't forcefully give Gryffindor points. Irina shook her head and thought with a smile. Yes, Good performance, Slytherin, Dumbledore said. However, several recent events must also be taken into account. The auditorium suddenly became quiet, and Irina was also a little surprised. Is it possible that Dumbledore still wants to force extra points when he is already at this level? First, Mr. Ron Weasley. Facing the invincible danger, he chose to ask the professor for help, which allowed our hero to get timely support. For this, I will reward Gryffindor 50 points. Quote. Dumbledore cleared his throat and said, "Ah, yes, what a timely support." Lynn at the Slytherin table and Irina at the Gryffindor table rolled their eyes at the same time. If Dumbledore had arrived any later, he might not even be able to see the remnant of Voldemort's soul. At this time, cheers came from the Gryffindor table, but they were not looking at Ron, but at Lynn, Irina, Hermione and Harry. Yes, during these few days, Lynn, Irina, Hermione, and Harry dared to face Voldemort, and spread the news of repelling Voldemort who broke into Hogwarts throughout the school, and Lynn, Ernest, Irina, Hermione and Harry were also called heroes by these students. Of course, Hermione and Harry's hero titles are basically obtained lying down. Although this is a good thing, it is a big trouble for Lynn. In the past few days, there are always some little Slytherin wizards who admire him want to visit him, which makes him unable to do alchemy. The practice was a bit unsettled. But these little Slytherin wizards all have status and background, and making friends with them will also help Lynn to move more smoothly in the wizarding world in the future. As for the little wizards from other colleges, they couldn't even enter the Slytherin common room, so naturally they couldn't bother Lynn. For Irina, this is happiness, because the little wizards of Gryffindor know that Irina likes all kinds of snacks and desserts. They called her a hero and gave her a lot of snacks as gifts. A gift, which made her, who was still a little awkward and unnatural, accept these praises calmly. After all, love and food are the only things you can't live up to. Second, Miss Hermione Granger. Facing dozens of stone chess pieces, she calmly responded and fought for opportunities for her companions. At the same time, she showed fearless courage and extraordinary courage in the face of danger. For this, I want to reward Gryffindor House with 60 points. Dumbledore said loudly. His words once again caused cheers to be heard from the Gryffindor table. Although Hermione was knocked down by Quirrell's spell as soon as she entered the last room, entering that room also requires sufficient courage. And this is why Dumbledore rewarded Hermione for this. Looking at the cheering little lions and the smelly little snakes, Dumbledore continued, "Third, Harry Potter. He also showed fearlessness and extraordinary courage in the face of danger. For this, I would also like to reward Gryffindor House with 60 points." After talking about Harry, it was Lynn and Irina's turn. Dumbledore was heard to say happily, "Finally, Lynn Roar and Irina Lowell." Facing extremely dangerous enemies, they showed their high magical strength and extraordinary courage. They used their magical power defeated the terrifying enemies and protected the peace of Hogwarts. For this, I will reward them with 150 points. 150 points for each of them. After Dumbledore finished speaking, the entire auditorium was filled with cheers from students from various colleges. If the young wizards from other colleges would still have objections to the first 3 receiving points, then everyone would agree that Lynn and Irina received awards. Although Dumbledore didn't say it clearly, everyone knew who the enemy Lynn and Irina were facing. That's a mysterious person. The Dark Lord who once ushered in darkness in the wizarding world and filled every wizarding family with death and mourning. How incredible it is to be able to defeat Voldemort as a little wizard in the first and second grades. Fortunately, Dumbledore gave Lynn and Irina 150 points. If they got 100 points, or 60 points like Hermione and Harry, I am afraid that the word, shady, will be carved on Dumbledore's forehead. After all, compared to facing Voldemort directly and repelling him, it is nothing at all to just pass through the mechanism of Children's Playhouse, and then be knocked down by Voldemort with one blow or lie on the sidelines all the way. At the end of the reward, Dumbledore also added 10 points to Gryffindor because of Neville's bravery, but this little thing is too insignificant compared to the previous things, and this mere point is very right. The final result has no bearing, so no one cares about the last 10. It seems that even if Dumbledore adds points for us, the final winner is still Slytherin. Irina smiled lightly and said. After Dumbledore finished announcing the extra points, the tight strings on the side of the Slytherin table were finally loosened. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief and cheered for the victory of their house. The ownership of the Academy Cup was determined, and the year-end banquet officially began. The year-end banquet is indeed one of the richest dinners at Hogwarts Castle in a year. The food on the long table is almost the same, which makes people appetite. Lynn's meat fork was so fast that it was about to have an afterimage, and the high-stacked delicacies on Lynn's plate were constantly being wiped out. In fact, Lynn's movements were already very elegant, while Irina, who was on the other side of the Gryffindor table, moved so fast that she almost couldn't grab it directly. Ah, woo-woo, I'll finish it even if I choke to death. Irina gulped down her drink so she wouldn't choke to death. At the Halloween dinner last time, she didn't eat because of the troll, and at the Christmas dinner, she was obsessed with opening blind boxes. Oh no, she only ate a little bit. This time she must make up for the food for the Halloween and Christmas dinners. The speed at which Irina ate was even shocking to Ron, who was holding a chicken leg in each hand and gnawing on it. Soon, the year-end banquet was over, and the young wizards from various colleges also returned to their dormitories to pack their things. The next day, everyone set foot on the way back from Hogwarts Castle. As the Hogwarts Express slowly drove into King's Cross Station, the little wizards jumped towards their parents with joy. At a corner of King's Cross Station, Lynn silently watched as Irina left with a younger-looking couple, then took the hand of the house elf Gale beside him, and returned to Tyrrell Manor. The testing for this school year ends here. At the beginning of the next school year, I will confirm your true identity, Irina. Lynn's mind was still thinking about everything that had happened at Hogwarts this year. Seeing Irina in the last room, Lynn has actually confirmed Irina's identity as a traverser, but there is still a thin layer of veil between him and Irina, and neither of them has separated it. Poke through. But now, after sensing Irina's kindness, Lynn decided to pierce this veil first and confess the identities of the time travelers on both sides. If it's one of our own, well, it seems we can prepare a nice gift. Lynn thought to himself as he walked into Roar Castle. Lynn came to the living room of the castle and saw Rowena sitting on the sofa reading the Daily Prophet. Mom, I have something to tell you. Lynn came and sat down next to Rowena, and then recounted everything that happened in Dumbledore's principal's office. After learning that her husband had never been a Death Eater, Rowena was a little shocked, but then she was a little relieved. I see, it's no wonder that although Henry joined the Death Eaters despite my persuasion, he often talked to me, complaining about Voldemort's cruelty. I didn't expect Henry to be Dumbledore's undercover, and even I didn't know about it. Thinking of this, Rowena felt a little disappointed. Lynn comforted. Mom, it may not be that he doesn't want to tell you the truth, but that there are too many ways in the magical world to obtain a person's memory, whether it is legilimency or veritaserum, or the alchemy array can achieve this goal. Rowena nodded slightly, and said, I understand all this. I'm not blaming him for not telling me the truth, but because I know the truth, but I can no longer see the real him. After the words fell, Rowena fell silent. Yes, if the price of knowing the truth is the death of her husband, then Rowena would rather hope that Henry would keep her secret for the rest of her life and be a Death Eater in her own eyes. Life on vacation is pleasant, even for Lynn. It is also a special pleasure for Lynn to be able to refine gold without being disturbed by outsiders. After Lynn N returned to Roll Castle, he spent 3 days and 3 nights replenishing the inventory of the Forbidden Flame, and then he continued to start the next step of alchemy. The alchemy that Lynn N is going to carry out this time is a combination of legal alchemy and array alchemy. He first has to use various raw materials to refine a magic power that has high adaptability and can carry and transmit a large amount of magic power. The original embryo, and the shape of this original embryo, Lynn intends to make it into an arm guard. Compared with gloves, the arm guard-shaped alchemy device will not affect Lynn's daily activities. Lynn can wear it with him, instead of taking it off when eating like gloves. This time, Lynn N made preparations in advance. Unlike the hasty refining of the previous alchemy gloves, there were more than 10 kinds of alchemy materials in front of Lynn N alone. In addition to 6 different metal and ore materials, Lynn also added many magical materials from magical animals. For example, the hair of the invisible beast can add the function of invisibility to the original embryo, making it more concealed. The powder made from the shed horn of the unicorn can effectively resist some black magic or curse attacks, the tail feathers of the phoenix and the hair from Hagrid, the fresh dragon blood of Charmander can increase the flame tolerance of the original embryo so as to prevent the final product from being destroyed by Lin's flame. There are many other magic materials, so I won't list them one by one. The functions of these magic materials are roughly the same, that is, to enhance the upper limit of magic charge and protection function of alchemy products. Aha! Lin En waved his left hand lightly, and a ball of flame rose out of thin air. Lin's right hand holding the wand shook slightly, and a silent floating spell was cast, and more than 10 kinds of materials placed beside him floated up one by one, and flew into the magic flame. The power of flames and alchemy is constantly converging, refining and fusing these materials, making them a new alchemical product. As time passed, a piece of metal shining with golden light appeared in the flames. Although this piece of metal was metal, it was very flexible and could even be stretched like a rubber band. This piece of metal that shone with golden light was covered with crimson lines, and the looming magical fluctuations made it enter the invisible state from time to time. At this moment, Lin En's alchemy has reached the final stage. Although Lin En has been exposed to French alchemy for 1 year less than array alchemy, Lin En's attainments in legal alchemy are not weaker than most French alchemists. After all, Lin's legal system of alchemy was taught by Nicole Flamel himself. Under Lin's control, the flames licked every corner of this piece of magic metal, and pushed it with a slight force to complete the transformation. Soon, this piece of magic metal turned into the shape of an arm guard. It was golden overall, and crimson lines appeared on the surface. Although it has not been enchanted by array alchemy, the inner side of this original arm guard has an alchemy rune naturally. This alchemy rune is produced by legal alchemy and cannot be engraved by an alchemist himself. As for the content of this alchemy rune, it is invisibility. After Lin En activated this alchemy rune with magic power, the original embryo of the arm guard can enter the invisible state. This alchemy rune comes from the fur of an invisible beast, which is a naturally born alchemy rune. After completing the refining of the original embryo of the arm guard, Lin En let out a long breath, and slowly retracted the flame. Although the alchemy process is very short, it takes a very long time. In order to refine the original arm guard, Lin En continued alchemy for 3 days and 3 nights. Casting the flame curse for 3 consecutive days without interruption, this consumes a lot of magic power. At this time, Lin's face was pale. He ate the food that the house elf Gale brought to the room, and at the same time absorbed the magic power of the magic stone to replenish the missing magic power for himself. Without the assistance of an alchemical device, the efficiency of the magic flow when Lin absorbs the magic power of the magic stone is extremely low. It can be said that for every 1% of the magic power that Lin absorbs, 99% of the magic power escapes into the air. If this is placed in a battle, Lin En's speed of replenishing magic power may not be able to keep up with the speed of his consumption. After resting for most of the day, Lin threw himself into alchemy again. After completing the arm guard prototype, what Lin En had to do was to use his knowledge of array alchemy to enchant the arm guard prototype and carve an alchemical array. So, another 4 days passed. Lin En waved his wand and clicked on the arm guard. He saw a golden light flashing past, and at least 100 densely packed alchemical formations originally engraved on the surface of the arm guard disappeared into the interior of the alchemy arm guard. Just like the alchemy circle of the mirror of Arised is hidden inside the object, as a powerful array alchemist, Lin naturally learned the secret method of hiding the alchemy circle. You're done. Lin let out a breath of foul air slowly. Although the magic power in his body was almost exhausted, there was a satisfied smile on his face. Lin En gently brushed off the dust left when engraving the alchemy circle, picked up the arm guard like a treasure, and put it on his right arm. Lin picked up his wand with his left hand, and tapped it lightly on the arm guard on his right arm. I saw a golden light flashing past, and a gap opened in the center of the arm guard, and a groove appeared inside. Various alchemical formations were connected to all sides of the groove, and almost every one the alchemy circle pulled out a golden thread connected with the groove. Lin carefully took out the magic stone and put the bright red gem into the groove of the arm guard. The magic stone fit perfectly into the groove of the arm guard. After the magic stone was embedded, the groove closed automatically, another golden light flashed through, and the cracks on the arm guard disappeared quietly, looking the same as before. But Lin En, who was equipped with an arm guard, could feel a surging power pouring into his body, and the powerful magic contained in the magic stone could also be wielded by him like an arm through this arm guard. Lin En was not surprised by this. After all, nearly half of the more than 100 alchemical formations he had engraved were about how to better control the power of the alchemical formations. From now on, let me call you Demon God Authority. Lin En nodded with satisfaction. After equipping the magic stone, he felt as if he had gained the power of the devil, able to create and destroy the world in a breath. Of course, this is just an illusion that he gained too much power in a short period of time. As for the actual situation, Lin guessed that he could fight Professor Green without losing. After all, the reason why Professor Green lost to Kasaragi on Halloween last year was because of his insufficient mana reserves, which caused the several alchemy circles around him to lose their energy source and could not continue to launch powerful attacks. Lin En, who has the power of the demon god, can use the magic stone as his energy source. This is an almost inexhaustible energy source. In addition, Lin's fire spell is powerful enough and will not accidentally damage friendly forces. Lin is fully capable of fighting Professor Green without falling behind. After completing the refining of the demonic god's authority, Lin En planned to take a short vacation for himself and have a good rest. Have you forgotten that you are on vacation now? Rowena looked at Lin and said helplessly. This kid shouldn't be assigned to Slytherin, he should go to Ravenclaw. How can a second-grade wizard have such a busy vacation? Seeing his mother's reproachful look, Lin En couldn't help but chuckled, and said, Mom, I forgot. However, I can rest for more than half a month, and I plan to go to France to find my mother in August. Teacher, with the magic stone here, it's time for me to learn the technique of refining the alchemy circle out of thin air. Although Rowena felt sorry for her child, seeing Lin En's eyes full of fighting spirit, she couldn't bear to dissuade him, so she had to let him go. On the other side, after the holidays at Hogwarts, Irina traveled around with her parents. Half a month after the vacation, Irina and her parents came to Scandinavia, located in the northwest corner of Europe, for a 7-day trip. The Scandinavian peninsula is located in the northwest corner of Europe. It is on the verge of the Baltic Sea, the Norwegian Sea and the Nordic Barents Sea. It borders Russia and northern Finland and reaches Finland in the north. It means, the place where the Scandinavians live. On the Scandinavian peninsula, there is a mountain range called the Scandinavian Mountains that runs through the central and western parts of the peninsula, forming the main axis of the peninsula's topography. This Scandinavian mountain range is the destination of Irina's family. Igor, I think we should take the buggy up the mountain. At the bottom of the Scandinavian mountains, a young woman said to the man behind Irina. The young lady is naturally Irina's mother, and the man is Irina's father, Igor Lowell. Oh, dear, don't you think hiking up the mountain is a wonderful thing? It will prevent us from missing those beautiful scenery. Igor showed a smile and said. Irina's mother, Carolina Lowell, was a little dissatisfied, and she only heard her say, if you want to hike up the mountain, I'm afraid 7 days is not enough for our trip. Igor was a little helpless. He looked at his baby daughter. Irina, which one do you think is more suitable, my idea or your mother's idea? Seeing the two looking at her, Irina showed a sweet smile. Mom's idea is correct. Under normal circumstances, we really can't complete the trip on foot within 7 days, but we have magic. With that said, Irina pulled out the wand from her pocket and waved it gently. Igor and Carolina only felt that their feet were light, and they had a feeling of being as light as a swallow. They moved a little, and found that their speed had increased a lot, while the physical exertion was reduced. With magic, we can travel throughout Scandinavia in a limited time without missing any scenery. Irina said with a smile. Looking at her parents' surprised expressions, Irina couldn't help but thank the senior Luoer from the bottom of her heart, who was a suspected time traveler. When she was about to go back on the Hogwarts Express that day, she received a notice, which warned little wizards not to use magic during the holidays. After receiving the notice, Irina felt a mysterious feeling magic wrapped around her wand, and she understood that it was a trace used by the Ministry of Magic to monitor the little wizard's spellcasting. Fortunately, that senior Luoer was kind enough to block Zongxi's monitoring with alchemy for her, which allowed her to use magic wantonly during the holidays for the convenience of herself and her family. With the blessing of magic, Irina's family climbed mountains, passed through countless dense forests, and enjoyed countless scenery. The time came to the second day after the family of three entered the Scandinavian mountains. Irina's family came to the depths of the Scandinavian mountains, and in front of them was an endless forest. Oh, forest adventure! Igor clapped his hands like a child and strode towards the interior of the forest. Irina and Carolina followed closely behind. This forest seemed strange. Whenever they moved a certain distance forward, Igor and Carolina would subconsciously walk in the opposite direction, which made Irina a little strange. Dad, Mom, why do you always change directions? Finally, Irina couldn't help asking. Instead, the two of them looked at Irina with puzzled faces, and only heard Carolina say, Irina, we have always been going in the same direction. Hearing this, Irina finally understood. I'm afraid that part of the forest they just detoured belongs to the magical world. If the center of this forest is a zone belonging to the magical world, then her parents, who are muggles, will naturally detour subconsciously when passing through this area, because all the junctions between the muggle world and the magical world are blocked. The Aurors of the Ministry of Magic have cast the muggle repelling curse, and all muggles who come here will leave for various reasons. The reason why Igor and Carolina did not leave, but changed directions without noticing, may be because they were blessed with Irina's magic. After learning that the magical world was ahead, Igor became interested, and under the leadership of Irina, he and Carolina walked into the originally detoured forest. Sure enough, as the three walked forward, everything they saw became more and more different. All kinds of magical plants grow in every corner of the forest, and they are shining with a different kind of brilliance, which is eye-catching. In addition to these magical plants, Irina also discovered many magical animals. However, these magical animals that had never seen humans did not dare to get too close. When Irina saw them, they retreated timidly, into the shadows. I don't know how long she walked, but Irina suddenly found that the trees in front of her became sparse, and a tree 4 to 5 meters high grew alone in the center of an open space. Irina asked her parents to stop, and then cautiously approached the tree. With a strong affinity for the ice element, she actually sensed that the tree was constantly exuding a cold breath. This turned out to be a tree that had never been recorded in the magical world. A new variety of magical trees. Just when Irina was about to touch the tree, she was suddenly startled and looked at the branches of the tree. Standing on the branches of this strange magical tree were dozens of small creatures with 2 small brown eyes and whose entire bodies looked like they were made of bark and twigs. Is this a bowtruckle? Irina couldn't help but be a little surprised. As far as Irina knows, the bowtruckle is a magical animal that guards trees. They mainly live in certain forests in western England, southern Germany and Scandinavia. A shy, insect-eating magical creature. Although the bowtruckle looks harmless, if the tree it lives in is threatened, it will jump down and pounce on the logger or tree repair expert who is trying to destroy its home. Long, sharp fingers dug into their eyes. And if a wizard dedicated the fool to the bowtruckle, it would soothe it for a long time so that he or she could take wood from the tree and make a wand. Yes, most of the trees that the bowtruckle lives on are magical trees that can be used as raw materials for wands. In other words, the strange magical tree in front of Irina is most likely a tree suitable as a wand material. This made Irina a little surprised. You know, when she was at Ollivander's wand store, Irina didn't actually get the wand that was most suitable for her. She tried almost all the wands in the entire wand store, but in the end she could only regret that these wands were not suitable for her. Among her wands, she chose a wand that was more suitable and allowed her to perform her magic more smoothly. Mr. Ollivander felt guilty for this for a long time and promised to give the wand to Irina. After all, in Mr. Ollivander's opinion, it was absolutely a dereliction of duty on his part that his wand shop did not have wands suitable for little wizards. But now, in this unheard of magical tree in front of her, Irina sees the hope of getting the wand that suits her best. Hello, cuties. Holding back her excitement for the time being, Irina looked at these bowtruckles. Her eyes lit up because of their cute and compact appearance. In addition to snacks, Irina's hobbies are cute little animals, otherwise she would not have raised so many Hakimi at home in her previous life. Now seeing these cute bowtruckles, Irina feels like her heart is about to turn into cuteness. At this time, these bowtruckles looked at Irina with some vigilance. Although this girl made them feel a kind of intimacy, they couldn't help but want to get close to her, but for the strange little witch they had never seen before, they couldn't help but want to get close to her. They still resisted the impulse in their hearts and remained calm. Until Irina took out a whole bottle of their favorite rhinoceros. Eat quickly, cuties. After signaling to her parents that they could come closer, Irina opened the bottles containing the rhinoceros and poured them onto the ground in front of the bowtruckles. Irina had seen cute creatures like bowtruckles in Hagrid's magical animal books, and knew that their favorite food was earth turtles, so she kept 3 or 4 bottles of earth turtles with her in case of emergencies. Neat. Unexpectedly, during this holiday trip, she actually encountered this cute magical animal in the Scandinavian mountains. Igor and Carolina watched with curiosity as these bowtruckles no longer held back and swarmed up, embracing the earthworms on the ground and enjoying them deliciously. While these bowtruckles were enjoying the turtle, Irina was also introducing this magical animal to her parents. Just when Irina was happily introducing it to her parents, a small bowtruckle gently pulled the white silk on Irina's calf with its small branch-like hands. "Ah, is this for me? Thank you so much." Irina looked over and saw the bowtruckle holding a branch that was higher than its body, trying to give it to Irina. Irina suddenly took the branch with some surprise. The branch was given by Bowtruckle himself. It was definitely a material that could be used to make a wand. In the wizarding world, the Bowtruckle is the quality inspector for the raw materials for wands. Only qualified wand materials will be given out as gifts by these lovely Bowtruckles. When she touched this branch, Irina could feel a faint cold air coming out of the branches, but this cold air did not make her feel cold, but made her feel very comfortable. It's like a part of the body. This feeling convinced Irina that this was the wand that was most suitable for her. After putting away the magic branches given by Bowtruckle, Irina and her parents planned to leave the forest. Although she likes these little lives very much, she is unwilling to disturb their lives. She just treats this experience as a wonderful encounter in her life and hides it in her heart forever. Irina thought so. But just as Irina slowly retreated, the Bowtruckle who presented Irina with a magic branch followed up with short legs. "What's wrong?" Irina squatted down and looked at the Bowtruckle curiously. I saw this small Bowtruckle pointing at Irina, then at myself, taking 2 steps closer to Irina, and finally stretched out my hand to pull the white silk on Irina's calf. "You mean, you want to come with me?" Irina was a little surprised. The Bowtruckle nodded vigorously, and jumped onto Irina's shoulder in one go, and leaned on Irina's head enjoying it. Feeling the little life next to her head, Irina couldn't help being a little surprised. Could it be that I could have my own Bowtruckle companion like Mr. Newt Scamander, the master of magical beasts? I remember Mr. Newt Scamander's Bowtruckle was named Picket, right? So what should I call my Bowtruckle? Irina looked at the Bowtruckle on her shoulder with some hesitation. Compared with other Bowtruckles, this Bowtruckle seems to be a little short in stature, but it looks very delicate. There is a gleam of light on the tree-like skin, just like that strange magical tree. At this moment, the Bowtruckle seemed to want to show its master its abilities. It stretched out its arms, and a piece of ice crystals condensed in front of it. Is this a mutated Bowtruckle? Or is it because the bloodline has evolved because of the strange magic tree growing on it? Seeing Bowtruckle's ability to summon ice crystals, Irina suddenly felt a little incredible. No wonder this Bowtruckle chose to follow him. In addition to his ability to attract small animals, his strong affinity for ice elements may also be a reason. In that case, let me call you Ching NV, Irina said happily. Although this is the West, Irina gave this Bowtruckle an Eastern name. Ching NV is the fairy in charge of frost and snow in Chinese legend, and the god of frost and snow in ancient mythology. Here, Irina's expectation is placed on this Bowtruckle to develop more abilities to control ice and snow in the future. Perhaps, Ching NV will become his inseparable partner. Irina looked at the young girl sitting on her shoulder, playing with a piece of ice crystal, and thought in her heart. After harvesting the magic branch and the Bowtruckle named Ching NV, Irina's family set off on their way home. In the next few days of getting along, Irina discovered that the young girl was a gluttonous Bowtruckle, which would eat 5 wood turtles every day. Fortunately, Irina took a lot from Hagrid before, otherwise there wouldn't be enough to feed it. If that's the case, Irina will have to make some purchases after she goes back. On the other side, in Roar Castle, after Lin finished refining the power of the demon god, he took a good rest at home for half a month. During this period, he did not practice magic or touch alchemy. scenery, or occasionally come to the Muggle world to visit the commercial streets of ordinary people. During this half-month, Lin En fully managed to combine work and rest, and did not let magic and alchemy completely fill his life. If it is said that during the period at the end of Hogwarts, Lin still looked a little gloomy and had serious negative emotions, then after half a month of recuperation, Lin seemed to have a new look, and the whole person seemed to have much more energy. At this time, the time has come to August, and there is still 1 month left before the end of the holiday. Mom, I'm leaving, Lin waved to Rowena and said. This time it was Lin who went to France to look for Green, so he could only complete this trip alone, and the underage wizard was not eligible to apply for the Ministry of Magic's cross-border door key, which made Lin have to go through the plane transport to France. The house elf Gale used apparition to take Lin to the London airport, and then Gale returned to Roar Castle. It was time to check in for the flight. Lin En, carrying a backpack with a traceless stretching spell on his back, came to the cabin after checking in. Soon, the plane slowly slid across the runway, then accelerated rapidly and lifted up. The plane flew smoothly in the stratosphere, and the flight attendant who delivered the meals came out pushing the dining cart. Lin unbuckled her seat belt, drank coffee leisurely and looked at the scenery outside the window. Although magic has countless magical features, the wisdom of ordinary people is not inferior. Thinking this, Lin glanced at the passengers around him. But at this moment, Lin En, who was keen, noticed something was wrong. In the rows at the back of the cabin, several passengers wearing masks seemed to have nervous eyes, and their hands were tightly clutched to their coats. But precisely because they were covering their coats, Lin could see several bulges on the surface of the tightly covered coat. That's a firearm. Borrowed it, thank you. Lin quickly stood up and pretended to walk towards the bathroom on the plane, taking the opportunity to observe those special passengers. From the eyes of those passengers, Lin saw not only the nervousness that was almost beyond words, but also a bit of madness. Obviously, these people are definitely not passengers, maybe hijackers. Lin hid in the bathroom. He pulled out his wand from his pocket and cast a simple spell on himself to make him look like an adult. Then he transformed the toilet paper next to him into a black metal mask, and a black cloak for an adult. At the same time, there seemed to be a conflict in the cabin. Bang bang bang. Ah, everyone, squat down. Along with several gunshots, exclamations came from the cabin, and a man's scolding caused the cabin to return to silence. In the cabin, 6 adult men wearing masks were standing in the aisle of the cabin, holding submachine guns or assault rifles. Passengers and flight attendants around them squatted down with their heads in their hands. Listen to me, I don't want to kill you, I only want money. Open the cockpit and let the captain follow my route. A gangster came outside the cockpit with a submachine gun and slammed the cockpit door hard. At this time, there was chaos in the cockpit. The co-pilot looked panicked and shouted loudly to the gangsters outside the cockpit, I don't know why you came to hijack the plane, but your actions are provoking the British and French police. Please stop illegal activities immediately. Otherwise you will definitely be judged. With that said, the co-pilot urged the captain beside him, quick, call the tower, and then find the nearest airport to make an emergency landing. Our cockpit door is very strong, they can't get in. The captain nodded quickly and called to the tower, planning to turn around and head towards the nearby airport. Hearing the sound inside the cockpit, the gangster shouted frantically, Judgment. I'm bankrupt and owe a lot of debt. I have no way out. Okay, don't open the door, right? If you don't open the door for 1 minute, I will shoot a tourist. I guess you arrive at the airport first, or we kill everyone in the cabin first. At worst, we all die together. The gangster yelled. At this moment, Lin En, who had hid in the airplane bathroom in advance, finally understood the whole story. According to the historical development process, a financial crisis will occur in Europe in mid-September 1992, causing the pound exchange rate to plummet and causing countless business operators to lose their lives. Although it was only August at this time, more than a month before the pound crisis recorded in history, September refers to the outbreak time of this crisis. As early as July and August, this storm had quietly swept through the European market. Powerful enterprises will not be affected at this moment, but some enterprises that are already poorly managed may have already become victims of the foreplay of this crisis. The gangsters in the cabin are obviously the so-called victims, and the fact that they were able to bring such extremely prohibited firearms onto the plane shows that there are definitely insiders among the airport staff. It can be seen that the scope of influence of their original influence is not small. It's a pity that he suffered a catastrophe and suffered a crushing defeat. These gangsters not only lost all their capital, but also owed a lot of debt. In order to survive, they finally chose the road of no return by hijacking the plane. After clarifying all this, Lin was ready to take action. No matter what the reason for the other party's hijacking, it had nothing to do with Lin. Lin only knew that the other party was in the way and hindered her happy trip to France. Lin En, who had transformed into the shape of an adult male under the influence of the spell, put on the black robe transformed by the transformation technique, and put on the black metal mask transformed by the transformation technique, quietly opened the bathroom door. The eyes full of murderous intent looked in the direction of the gangsters. At this moment, a desert eagle was slowly raised, and the dark hole pointed directly at the gangster at the farthest cockpit door. Boom! A gunshot rang out, and a high-speed rotating bullet shot into the back of the gangster's head in an instant. Immediately afterwards, there was an explosion, and the gangster's head exploded, turning into a mist of blood. The gangster's headless body also fell down helplessly. Seeing this scene, both the passengers who squatted down with their heads in their hands and the remaining 5 gangsters felt very incredible. "What the hell is this, a pistol?" one of the gangsters exclaimed in disbelief. "One shot blasted his head into blood mist. This is Barrett, right? There are 5 of us, and he only has 1 pistol. The advantage is mine." At this time, another gangster shouted loudly. In his opinion, the 5 of them held submachine guns or assault rifles, while Lin held only a small pistol. Even if it was a little more powerful, could it still compare to them? "I'm afraid that before Lin had time to fire a shot, he would be shot into pieces by them." As the gangster finished speaking, the other 4 gangsters raised their firearms and pointed them at Lin En. However, these gangsters are not killers who have experienced blood and rain. They are just bankrupt entrepreneurs. Otherwise, they would not have killed a single person before. As soon as you arrive, you have to shoot half of the passengers to establish your authority. Even though these gangsters aimed their guns at Lin, they hesitated for a moment and did not shoot immediately. In their opinion, Lin, who was pointed at 5 submachine guns or assault rifles, would definitely give up resistance and surrender. However, they would hesitate, but not Lin. Boom, boom. Lin En raised his hand without hesitation and pulled the trigger twice in succession. 2 enchanted bullets were accurately shot into the heads of the 2 gangsters. Then the alchemy circle was activated, and a violent explosion blew the heads of the 2 gangsters into blood, fog. At this point, it was too late for the remaining 3 gangsters to fight back. The 3 gangsters frantically pulled the triggers and shot at Lin, but Lin's body seemed to move 2 meters to the right, causing all the bullets to miss. Boom, boom. 2 more gunshots from the Desert Eagle appeared. The 2 gunshots were like death scythes in the ears of the gangsters. Before they could react, the heads of the 2 gangsters exploded into blood mist. Seeing that all his companions were dead, the remaining gangster quickly dropped his weapons and tried to beg Lin En for mercy. However, Lin didn't even look at his movements. After killing several gangsters in front of him, he moved the muzzle of the gun to the head of the last gangster without any pause and pulled the trigger. After killing all the gangsters, Lin En glanced at the passengers and flight attendants who were squatting down with their heads in their hands, not daring to look around. He shot several more shots to blow up the surveillance camera in the cabin, and then quickly retreated to the bathroom and released the signal. Lost his own disguise. I don't know how long it took before the passengers and flight attendants cautiously poked their heads out. After seeing the 6 headless corpses on the ground, they all screamed in surprise. They couldn't believe that these gangsters were all dead, and in such a state of death. "Who killed them?" someone asked in horror. "I just took a sneak peek. It was a man wearing a black metal mask, but I didn't see where he came from or where he went. It's as if that man never existed." Another person said crazily that he felt like he saw God, and God saved them. At this time, a well-trained flight attendant walked to the cockpit and told the 2 captains what happened in the cabin. After learning that the gangsters were all shot dead by unknown persons, the 2 captains were a little shocked. In the end, they chose to resume their original route, and then let the French police at the destination Paris handle matters on the plane. Only then did Lin come out of the bathroom on the plane. After removing his disguise, he looked scared and looked at the flight attendant. I thought I heard a gunshot just now, so I was too scared to come out. What just happened? What's up? Seeing the timid appearance of this boy who was only 12 or 13 years old, a female flight attendant was filled with motherly love. She quickly came over, covered Lin N's eyes to prevent him from seeing the body on the ground, and then guided Lin N back in one's own position. There were gangsters who hijacked the plane just now, but for some reason they all died. It's okay, it's okay. The female flight attendant was still scared as she comforted Lin, who looked very scared. Lin nodded and made a surprised expression. Someone hijacked the plane. This is too scary. The female flight attendant nodded happily and said with lingering fear, yes, luckily it's safe. In this way, the plane finally arrived safely at the Paris airport. Almost at the same time the plane stopped, a dozen heavily armed French armed police swarmed into the cabin, dragged away the headless bodies of the 6 gangsters, and escorted all passengers and flight attendants off the plane. Lin, who was only 12 or 13 years old, would naturally not be suspected by the French police. After the most basic investigation and registration, Lin left the airport with a backpack on his back. I didn't expect that something like this would happen. I don't know if I can get the door key in time. Lin walked quickly. Due to the hijacking incident, the plane arrived in Paris more than an hour later than expected. This made Lin need to hurry up and find the door key that she had applied for before. Yes, as Lin's status as a minor wizard, although he cannot apply for cross-border door keys, he still has the authority to apply for ordinary door keys. Coupled with the fact that Lin registered his status as an alchemist when he wrote to apply to the French Ministry of Magic, Lin was looked upon highly, and his application was naturally approved. Lin almost ran and came to a closed alley. At the end of this alley was a wall, a dead end, and in the corner was a small plastic trash can. Lin stepped forward quickly and grabbed the small plastic trash can. Almost a few seconds after he picked up the trash can, Lin only felt a hook hooking his navel, and then he flew forward quickly and landed. At this time, he had appeared outside Green's residence. I almost missed it. Lin wiped the non-existent sweat from his forehead. The small plastic trash can just now was the door key he applied for. Fortunately, he ran faster and caught it before the door key was triggered. Lin adjusted her clothes, walked forward, and knocked on the door. Soon, the door opened, revealing the face of the man inside. Good afternoon, Teacher Green, Lin said with a smile. Good afternoon, Lin, come in. Green showed a smile to Lin, opened the door and let Lin walk in. Lin came to Green's house obediently. Green's house looked very simple, almost no different from ordinary people's houses. The living room was furnished with a sofa, a coffee table, and a TV. Lin couldn't see anything related to magic. After putting down his backpack and sitting down side by side with Green on the sofa, Lin stated his purpose straight to the point. Teacher, I want to learn your ability to refine alchemical formations out of thin air. Hearing this, Green was not surprised. He chuckled and asked, did you get the Sorcerer's Stone? Green had already expected that Lin would obtain the Philosopher's Stone. After all, before the start of this school year, he was the one who went to Hogwarts according to Teacher Flamel's instructions to inform Dumbledore of Teacher Flamel's decision. Lin nodded, rolled up the sleeve of his right arm, and tapped his wand lightly on his right arm. A metal arm guard as thin as silk appeared on Lin's right arm. Lin N took off the demon god authority and handed it to Green. Green held the power of the demon god and sensed the power of alchemy in it. He kept praising. What a wonderful idea. Using the combination of legal alchemy and array alchemy, you can refine a material that can bear the responsibility of connecting magic, and the alchemy product of the bridge of the wizard's body allows the wizard to extract external magic power for his own use when casting spells. What's its name? Green asked, returning the power of the demon god to Lin. Lin put the demon god's authority back on his right arm and said softly, the demon god's authority, because when I use it, I feel as if I have the power of a god. Green nodded slightly, and said, gaining too much power in a short period of time will indeed create this illusion. The authority of the demon god is a good name. As he spoke, Green raised his head again and asked, are you planning to publish this alchemical product publicly? I think that as long as you replace some precious metals with cheaper materials and reduce the engraving of some alchemical circles, it can be made a weakened version of the authority of the demon god that can only absorb the magic power of the magic crystal. As Green said, if Lin is willing, he can make a weakened version of the power of the demon god, and then publish it publicly for profit. You know, today's French alchemists can be described as dying of floods and droughts. The reason why this kind of polarization between rich and poor occurs is because some alchemists can invent their own alchemical products and obtain a lot of profits by selling them, and then use them as principal to do more research and development, while some alchemists were unable to invent their own products, and ended up in poverty, not even having the capital to buy alchemy materials. Of course, not all alchemists will fully announce their new inventions. Just like the forbidden magic stone invented by Green, he selectively deleted the content of array alchemy and made it a pure magic stone. It is a product of alchemy, and it was published after weakening a large number of its functions. For this already powerful alchemy product, even though it has been weakened layer by layer, Green still received numerous honors after it was announced, and even became one of the chocolate frog cards. Ordinary wizards have little demand for alchemical products such as forbidden demon stones, which are used to protect certain important items, but they are still able to achieve such a status. And if the weakened version of the demon god's power is announced, it is conceivable that Lin will gain from it. How much wealth and status? After all, any alchemist can make magic crystals, which makes alchemy products such as magic crystals have already reached the point of bad street. If the weakened version of the demon god's authority really comes out, then almost every wizard who has a weakened version of the demon god's authority can use it to raise his magic level to a higher level. This is an irresistible temptation for any wizard. They can even drive changes in the supply and demand relationship of magic crystals, making a large number of alchemists rich. It can be seen how terrifying the power of the devil that Lin En accidentally discovered is. However, faced with the temptation of wealth and status, Lin En shook his head and said, "No, I don't plan to make it public for the time being. If the function of the devil's authority is known to everyone, then whenever I use it in the future, I will surpass myself. There are too many high-level magic, so anyone with a discerning eye can see whose power I have borrowed, the Philosopher's Stone. Human nature is greedy, and I don't want to make myself the target of public criticism, unless I have enough power like my master to ignore all potential threats. Therefore, I may announce a weakened version of the product like you, teacher, in the future, but definitely not now." Lin said so. Green showed a satisfied look. In fact, his inquiry just now was just a test for Lin. If Lin En was really deceived by wealth and status, then as a teacher, he would naturally stand up and point out the pros and cons of the cruel reality. But it is clear that Lin has an understanding of human nature and prudence towards reality, which makes Green very satisfied. "Very good. Come with me, I'll teach you the technique of making an alchemy circle out of thin air." Green stood up with a smile and walked towards the inner room. Lin followed Green, but found that Green stopped at the door of the bedroom. Green pulled out his wand, tapped lightly on the bedroom door handle, and then motioned with his eyes to Lin to grab his hand. Lin seemed to understand something and reached out to grab Green, while Green raised his hand to hold the door handle. The moment the doorknob was touched, Lin En felt a sudden spin, and then, in a blink of an eye, the two of them appeared in a secret room surrounded by silver metal walls. "This is a special space I built using alchemy inside the house, and cast the traceless stretch spell to expand its internal space a second time, and finally reinforced its spatial stability through alchemy. We can alchemy and even fight here." Quote. Green introduced it concisely. Lin nodded slightly. It was not like he had never used alchemy to create space. The inner space of the suitcase where Hagrid's Charmander lived was created using this method. He can also expand the space twice through the traceless stretch spell, but the space he creates cannot withstand powerful magic fluctuations. As long as the magic power fluctuations in the space exceed the upper limit of its stable value, the space is likely to collapse. Therefore, Green's steps to strengthen the spatial stability of this secret room are extremely important. After arriving in the secret room, Green began to teach Lin. First of all, what Green taught was the secret method of carving alchemical circles without the need for a carving knife. This secret method required powerful magic power to support it. And Lin En, who has the power of the devil and the magic stone as an energy source, will naturally not lack such things as magic power. I saw Lin raising his right hand holding the wand. A strange wave of magic power spread out. A steady stream of magic power was injected into Lin's body from the Philosopher's Stone through the authority of the demon god, and a highly absorbent magic power was released from the magic wand. It was slowly spit out and condensed into shape on a metal plate in front of Lin. Very good. This is the first step. Let the magic power be strongly absorbed on the alchemy object so that it will not dissipate. Green nodded slightly. Under Green's teaching, Lin gradually became familiar with the alchemy method of replacing the carving knife with a wand, and he quickly drew an alchemy circle on the metal plate with the wand. Yes, draw. Unlike the method of engraving magic power into the surface of the alchemy object with a carving knife, the magic power spit out by the wand is absorbed on the surface of the metal plate by virtue of its strong absorption, just like drawing on paper, so this method of alchemy uses drawing. It seems more appropriate to describe it. Next, just like you cast spells without a wand, try to get rid of the wand and use your body to release the same absorbing magic. Green continued to guide. Although the teaching has been considered a success when the wand is used instead of the carving knife, Green has higher requirements for his disciples. Only by relying on the body alone can he still refine the alchemy circle with his bare hands. Lin En was able to rely on alchemy to save his life under any circumstances. Lin nodded, put down his wand, and then tried to concentrate the magic power on his fingertips. Alchemy does not require a wand, which is similar to the wandless spellcasting of the magic system. Lin En, who already mastered the technique of silent and wandless spellcasting, has a natural advantage in learning alchemy. In just over half an hour, Lin En was able to refine the alchemy circle without relying on any external objects. Okay, the next step is to refine the alchemy circle out of thin air. Green nodded with satisfaction and said, compared with refining an alchemy circle from foreign objects, the difficulty of refining an alchemy circle in the air is not at the same level. It's like the former requires you to dip your hands in ink to write, while the latter requires you to write on the air. Refining the alchemy circle out of thin air requires us to condense the magic power in the air without dissipating it. In the absence of a carrier, we can only make the magic power itself a carrier. That is to say, we need to compress the tangible but intangible magic power for tangible and qualitative magic. Under Green's narration, Lin gradually understood the key technique of this secret method, which is to compress a large amount of magic power into a small ball of magic power, making this ball of magic power rich enough to become a real substance. However, if the magic power is forcibly condensed, the magic power required to achieve tangible and qualitative levels is massive. If you want to condense a qualitative magic power the size of an apple, I am afraid that you will need to consume a magic power group the size of a swimming pool. At this time, it was necessary to use the secret method taught by Green. Under the influence of the secret method, Lin En was able to condense the qualitative magic power more easily. Lin En waved his wand, and a thread of qualitative magic power appeared. Speeding through the air, it finally formed an alchemy rune. Let's stop here. You already have the ability to refine the alchemy circle out of thin air. As for the practice, wait until tomorrow. I'm afraid you have reached the limit. Seeing Lin En draw the alchemy runes, Green decisively stopped Lin En's next move, pointed to the fine beads of sweat on Lin En's forehead, and said so. Hearing this, Lin En scattered the alchemy runes in the air with relief, staggered and sat on the ground, panting heavily. As Green said, under these 7 or 8 hours of study, he has reached his limit. Although the sorcerer's stone powers him, the excessive magic power carried for a long time has already put a huge load on Lin's body. Lin looked very tired, but his face was full of excitement. After 2.5 days of rest, Lin and Green came to this secret room again. Lin En resolutely skipped the step of using the wand to refine the alchemy circle out of thin air, and chose to directly start refining the alchemy circle without the wand. I saw Lin En waving his hands in a familiar manner, and golden magical threads spurted out from the tips of his 10 fingers, intertwined with each other in the air, and turned into alchemical runes. Then, more golden threads spurted out. Then, connect these golden alchemy runes in series or in parallel to form a complete alchemy circle. Lin En estimated the carrying capacity of his body, increased the rate of absorbing the magic power of the Philosopher's Stone, and once again refined 2 alchemy circles out of thin air. At this time, a total of 3 alchemy circles were suspended beside Lin En, as if they were guarding their king. Come on, try attacking me. Green stood tens of meters away, beckoning to Lin. Lin En nodded slightly, and with a thought in his mind, the 3 alchemy circles shot out countless golden beams like machine guns. The golden beams emitted by these 3 alchemical formations are the same as Lin's alchemical floating cannon, but these 3 alchemical formations do not require a lot of time to accumulate power like the alchemical floating cannon. If the alchemy floating cannon can only emit 1 golden beam every 30 seconds, then the alchemy circle around Lin En can fire up to 30 golden beams per second under the condition of sufficient magic power supply. Countless golden beams of light turned into meteors all over the sky, exploding in Green's direction. Facing such a terrifying attack, Green did not change his face. He waved his wand, and the same 3 alchemy circles formed around him in an instant, and also emitted a powerful golden light beam, which was similar to Lin's. The golden beams collided with each other and cancelled each other out. Lin couldn't help but feel a little emotional when he saw Green repelling his attacks so easily. As expected of his teacher, the alchemy circle that he spent more than 10 minutes refining could be formed in an instant with just a thought. It seems that after refining the demonic power, Lin estimated that he could face Teacher Green without falling behind, but he still overestimated himself. After all, even if he has the powerful silent and wand-casting flame spell, plus the magic stone as a magic power supply, I am afraid that before he has time to attack, the alchemy circle formed by the opponent's thought can smash himself into a sieve. Got it? For the next week or so, Lin En went to the secret room every day under the leadership of Green to practice the secret method of refining the alchemy circle out of thin air. With constant practice, although Lin En could not refine the alchemy array in one thought like Green, the time it took to refine an alchemy array went from 10 minutes to 1 or 2 minutes. Create an alchemy circle. However, Lin En could only do this. No matter how hard Lin En practiced, his speed of refining the alchemy circle out of thin air was stuck in the range of 1 to 2 minutes. After practicing the skills of refining the alchemical array, Lin learned alchemical methods from Teacher Green, such as using alchemy to strengthen the stability of space, which benefited Lin a lot. Soon, more than a week passed, and at this time, only the last half-month was left before the start of school. Similarly, this is also the time when Lin intends to return to the UK and go to Diagon Alley to buy study materials. See you next year, teacher. In Green's hut, Lin puts her backpack on her back, grabs an old teacup on the coffee table that is incompatible with other teacups, and bids farewell to Green. After learning that Lin had suffered a hijacking on his way to France, Green felt very regretful and thought that he should have gone to Roll Manor in person to pick up Lin. Now that Lin was planning to return to the UK, Green deliberately used his own as a famous French alchemist. He applied to the French Ministry of Magic for a cross-border key for Lin to use. Soon it was time for the portkey to be triggered. Lin En only felt his belly button being hooked, and then he flew high. When Lin landed, he was already outside the leaky cauldron. Because the first thing Lin had to do when he returned to the UK was to buy textbooks for the next school year, when Green applied for the cross-border door key, he thoughtfully set his destination directly outside the leaky cauldron. Senior Luo. At this time, a somewhat surprised voice sounded not far from Lin. Hearing the reputation, it was Irina who spoke. Irina, who returned from a trip to Scandinavia, also planned to go to Diagon Alley to buy teaching materials. When she came to the leaky cauldron, Irina saw Lin appearing out of thin air. Senior Luo. Irina said curiously, are you apparating? Lin shook his head and said, I just came back from out of town and took the portkey. Irina nodded thoughtfully, and then invited, Senior Luo, you are also here to buy textbooks, right? Why don't we come together? By the way, I also want to thank you for using alchemy to block my traces. It helped. I'm very busy. Facing Irina's invitation, Lin readily agreed. So, the two walked into the leaky cauldron together. But just as they were about to walk towards the backyard, Irina was stopped by Old Tom, who was wiping a dirty wine glass with one hand. I remember you, little witch. Did you kick the trash can crookedly last year? Asked Old Tom, staring into Irina's eyes. Hearing this, Irina suddenly felt guilty. She quickly said, I'm sorry. I was confused at the time. If I cause any loss to you, boss, I am willing to compensate you. She came to Diagon Alley for the first time last year. After seeing the classic scenes in the original book, she recalled some hot memes on the internet. She couldn't help it, so she kicked the trash can. I didn't expect to be recognized by old Tom today. Still in front of Senior Luo. It's so embarrassing. Ooh. Irina was a little ashamed. She lowered her head. However, old Tom didn't mean to pursue responsibility. He waved his hand and said, "Don't do this next time." At this moment, Lynn looked at Irina, who was beside her, with a strange look. "Good guy, last year I was thinking who was so reasonless." "Irina, watch out for the resin. Watch out for the resin," Lynn said in a teasing tone. Even though Irina was an extrovert, she didn't dare to talk to her at the moment. However, her Bowtruckle girl poked her head out of her school bag and waved to Lynn N, which was considered as a hello. "This is the Bowtruckle, is it your pet?" Lynn asked with some surprise. Seeing that the matter of kicking the trash can was finally exposed, Irina nodded solemnly and said, "Yes, I met this when I traveled to Scandinavia during the summer vacation. It wanted to follow me. I just bring it back." Lynn Ann looked at the young girl, who took out a ground turtle from her backpack and nodded slightly. It seems that this Bowtruckle is well raised by Irina. Fat and fat. Lynn and Irina were shopping for items for the next school year according to the list given by Hogwarts, and their last stop, where they spent the most money, was Flourish and Blott's bookstore. In the wizarding world, maybe the price of a magic book is enough for a wizard to buy several ounces of dragon liver. When the two came outside Flourish and Blott's bookstore, they found that Flourish and Blott's bookstore seemed to be crowded with people. There were a lot of wizards at the entrance of the store with their feet up and looking inside. In front of the upstairs window of Lihan Bookstore, the two saw a large banner with 4 lines written on it. "Gilderoy Lockhart, autobiography for sale, Icon Magic. Today from 12:30 to 4:30 p.m. Looking at the banner, the two finally understood what happened here. "Looks like that idiot Lockhart is signing books. Are you going to buy this year's Defense Against the Dark Arts textbook?" Irina looked at Lynn and tilted her head. In Irina's subconscious mind, she already regarded Lynn as a time traveler like herself, and in her opinion, Lynn also understood Lockhart's true face. Of course, this is indeed the case. Looking at Irina's cute tilted head, Lynn N spread his hands and said, "I don't want to buy it, what about you?" Irina nodded affirmatively, "I won't buy either." Hearing this, the two looked at each other and smiled. As for the few books written by Lockhart, they are somewhat fun to read as novels, but if you want to learn Defense Against the Dark Arts knowledge from them, then just go to sleep and daydream. Besides, if they want to read novels, wouldn't it be nice to go to the Muggle world to read novels for a few dollars a piece? Still need to buy this kind of magic book that costs dozens of galleons. At this moment, Lockhart's voice came from Lihan Bookstore. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lockhart shouted, waving everyone for silence, "what an extraordinary moment this is. I want to take advantage of this wonderful occasion to announce a small matter, which I have suppressed. Some days, I haven't said anything. When young Harry walked into Flourish and Blott's today, he just wanted to buy my autobiography. I would give it to him for free on the spot," Lockhart said loudly. "But he doesn't know," Lockhart's voice continued, "that he will soon get something more valuable than his humble work, Magical Me. In fact, he and his classmates will get a real, I am a magician. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am extremely happy and proud to announce that this September, I will be the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." I saw that in Lihan Bookstore. Harry was dragged by Lockhart with a face full of reluctance, as a tool to hype his fame. Chapter 91. Harry. Seeing Harry being pulled by Lockhart in Flourish and Blott's bookstore, Irina was stunned. She hesitated whether to rescue her friend. However, after Irina thought that due to her reputation for fighting off Voldemort's remnant soul in Hogwarts, she might be temporarily captured by Lockhart as a tool for publicity, she decided to let Harry enjoy the happiness alone. After a while, Lynn and Irina saw Harry staggering to the wall holding a stack of thick books, and then poured all the books signed by Lockhart into Ginny's cauldron as a gift. "A gift for my future wife." However, just as Harry and Ginny were about to talk, Malfoy, who had fallen in love with Harry, appeared and started taunting Harry. The quarrel of the juniors quickly alerted their elders, and Lynn and Irina just watched Lucius Malfoy and Arthur Weasley fight in the bookstore. "Should we break up the fight?" Irina said hesitantly. Lynn shrugged his shoulders and said, Mr. Malfoy is the father of my roommate, and Mr. Weasley is the father of my good friend. It's not suitable for me to help anyone. However, you are not a friend of Harry and Ron. Really, go and help. Hearing Lynn's words, Irina nodded, pulled out her wand and squeezed into Flourishes and Blott's bookstore. Separate left and right, Irina waved her wand, and an invisible magic force separated Lucius and Arthur. However, as a good friend of Harry and Ron, she naturally wanted to go astray. After being hit by the separation curse, Arthur only stumbled back 2 steps, while Lucius, who was also hit by the separation curse, flew out and hit the bookshelf behind him. With Irina separating them, these 2 respectable adults were naturally embarrassed to fight again. Here, little girl, take your book. I'm afraid this is the best thing your father can give you. Lucius said viciously, and threw an old notebook into Ginny's arms. Lucius waved to Draco and rushed out of the shop. You shouldn't pay him any attention, Arthur, this fellow is so bad. At this time, Hagrid, who was planning to persuade the fight, came over. He smiled at Irina, and then said to Arthur. Hagrid led everyone out of Flourishes and Blott's bookstore. The clerks seemed to want to stop them to compensate for the losses, but after seeing Hagrid's huge body, the clerks gave up. Irina, thank you for being here, otherwise Weasley's old face would be lost. Mrs. Weasley, who was mad with anger, gave Arthur a vicious look, and then smiled at Irina as if she had changed her face. Just as Mrs. Weasley was accusing Arthur, the young Bowtruckle girl in Irina's backpack poked her head out and looked around curiously. Hagrid, who already loves magical animals, noticed the Bowtruckle in Irina's backpack. He said with some surprise, the Bowtruckle. Is this yours, Irina? Seeing that Hagrid noticed Ching NV, Irina simply stopped hiding it. She carefully held Ching NV in her palm, and then introduced to everyone, this is Ching NV. I am in Scandinavia during my vacation. The little guy the first met during my trip to the peninsula. Young girl, this seems to be an oriental name, Arthur said. Irina nodded and said, yes, the reason why I gave her such a name is because Ching Envy is not an ordinary Bowtruckle, but one whose bloodline has mutated and evolved new abilities. Bowtruckle, as for the new ability, I won't talk about it on the street. In the more than half a month since she got along with Ching Envy, she has already regarded her as her partner. In addition, Ching Envy is a female Bowtruckle, so Irina calls Ching Envy, she. After hearing this, everyone stopped talking about Ching Envy. It was not uncommon for Bowtruckles to live with wizards, but the Bowtruckles that evolved by blood were unheard of. Naturally, such secret matters could not be discussed on the street. At this moment, Irina saw Lynn walking out of Lihan bookstore. When you went to persuade the fight just now, I went to buy this year's book, and I bought your copy by the way. Lynn said, throwing a bag full of magic books to Irina. Irina opened the bag and found that except for the book on defense against the dark arts, all the other teaching materials were complete, so she thanked her in surprise. Ah, thank you. Here is the money to buy the books. At this time, Mrs. Weasley greeted Lynn with a smile. Good afternoon, child, did you have a good summer vacation? Knowing his real background, Lynn nodded calmly in the face of Mrs. Weasley's concern, and said, very well, thank you for your concern. Mrs. Weasley continued, we're done shopping and we're going back. Would you like to visit the Burrow? Lynn and Irina. Lynn shook his head and said, no, I just came back from a trip to France, and I haven't returned home to report to my mother that I'm safe. Mrs. Weasley glanced at Irina. Irina hesitated for a moment, but declined politely, I'm going to Ollivander's wand shop later. I'm afraid it will take a lot of time, so I won't interrupt. Hearing this, Mrs. Weasley nodded regretfully, but she didn't say much. So, Lynn left in another direction, and Irina came to Ollivander's wand shop alone. Good afternoon, beautiful lady. Oh, it's you, Miss Lowell. After noticing someone entering the door, Mr. Ollivander walked up to say hello. Irina nodded and said, good afternoon, Mr. Ollivander. Mr. Ollivander said, I'm sorry that I couldn't choose the right wand for you last time, Miss Lowell. I don't know what you are here for. If you want to try my new wand, you can come with me. Irina shook her head and said, no, Mr. Ollivander. I want you to see if this wood can be used to make a wand. With that said, Irina took out the branch of the mysterious magic tree that Qingmi gave to her in the Scandinavian mountains. Mr. Ollivander's eyes lit up when he saw this magic branch. A branch that can release frost must be a magical tree, but why have I never heard of a magical tree that can release frost? Mr. Ollivander stroked the branch as if he were touching some kind of rare treasure, but there was a look of confusion on his face. Irina explained, "This is the magic tree I met during my vacation. This should be a species that has never been discovered." Mr. Ollivander nodded thoughtfully, and then said, "It turned out to be a brand new species. Miss Lowell, as the discoverer of this brand new species of magic tree, you have the right to name it." Irina was stunned for a moment, then she lowered her head and pondered for a while, and said, "Then call it ice crystal wood." "So, can the branch of this ice crystal wood be used as the body of a wand?" Irina asked. Mr. Ollivander said, "Of course, Miss Lovell, there is no material more suitable for making a wand. But what core should be used for this only ice crystal wood wand? Dragon heartstrings or unicorn's maw? It's really hard to decide. A wand with unicorn hair as its core is highly resistant to black magic and is suitable for children with a kind heart." In Mr. Ollivander's opinion, unicorn hair is definitely suitable for Irina. There is no doubt that it is. However, a wand made with unicorn hair as its core also has a disadvantage, that is, its upper limit is low, making it difficult to cast extremely powerful spells. If the holder of the wand wants to cast black magic, he will also be subject to the repulsion of the unicorn hair. Wand core actually limits the wizard's strength. Dragon's heartstrings, Irina said suddenly. Although unicorn hair is more suitable for her today, she understands that in the magical world, only absolute strength can allow her to protect her family from being bullied, and a wand with unicorn feathers as the core will allow her to having her hands and feet tied was something she didn't want to see. Seeing that the owner of the ice crystal wood had spoken, Mr. Ollivander no longer hesitated and took out a relatively fresh dragon's heartstring from the material bag. This period is the beginning of the school season. Generally speaking, Mr. Ollivander will make enough wands in advance to sell to young wizards, and will not make new wands during this period. But faced with the brand new wand material of ice crystal wood, as a wand maker, it was naturally difficult for him to refuse this temptation. So, Mr. Ollivander took the ice crystal wood and the dragon's heartstring and walked towards the place of work. Fortunately, it is already mid to late August. Most of the young wizards who are about to enter Hogwarts have already bought their own wands in July, and the number of new young wizards who appear in the wizarding world every year is not too many. Therefore, no one came into the shop to disturb Mr. Ollivander while he was making wands. Irina watched eagerly as Mr. Ollivander made her wand, and she waited patiently. Time flew by and it was already past 9 o'clock in the evening before I knew it. Mr. Ollivander had been working continuously for more than 5 hours. "It's done. Come and try it, Miss Lowell. Ice crystal wood, 13 1/4 inches, the heartstrings of a dragon, the material is flexible." Mr. Ollivander said happily. He gently blew the sawdust off the new wand, then carefully picked up the new wand and handed it to Irina. "This new wand looks very gorgeous." Irina can see subtle ice blue lines on the surface of the wand. These ice blue lines are not carved by Mr. Ollivander, but are naturally possessed by the ice crystal wood. Irina's heart was beating loudly. She could feel the friendly emotions coming from the wand. She suppressed her inner excitement, raised the wand, and waved it gently. I saw a ray of icy blue light explode from the top of the wand, and endless cold air surged in all directions, freezing everything in the entire Ollivander's wand shop into ice sculptures in an instant. Not only that, extremely exquisite ice is constantly condensing in Ollivander's wand shop, and ice in the shape of a chandelier is actually condensing in this small room. It's as if this Ollivander's wand shop is no longer that small shop, but an eternal ice palace transformed by thousands of years of ice. Under the attack of the power of ice, Irina, who has a strong affinity for the ice element, was fine, but Mr. Ollivander in front of her was almost frozen into an ice sculpture, with only her eyes and mouth still normal. Activity. Take it, Miss Lowell. Mr. Ollivander wanted to cry, but let Irina try the new wand, but unexpectedly turned his wand shop into an ice palace. Fortunately, Irina, who already has the power to control ice, was able to take back the ice with her mind, otherwise the entire Ollivander's wand shop would have been destroyed. I didn't expect this magic wand to be so powerful, or did my affinity for the ice element inspire its original power? Irina looked at Ollivander's wand shop, which had been restored to its original state, with lingering fears. She understood that with her own level of magic, it was impossible to release the magic like a creator. It seems that this ice crystal wood is definitely not an ordinary magical tree. It's perfect, Miss Lowell, this is definitely the most suitable wand for you, Mr. Ollivander said happily. Irina smiled sweetly. She seemed to have thought of something, and took out her original wand from her arms. Now that I have a wand that really suits me, I will return this wand to you, okay? Mr. Lavender. Hearing this, Mr. Ollivander shook his head and said, since I said I would give it to you before, I would give it to you. However, this ice crystal wood wand is not cheap. The previous wand was because of Hogwarts only. The subsidy from CC School of Magic and the Ministry of Magic will sell it to little wizards at the price of 7 galleons, but you are no longer a freshman. Irina nodded and said, I see. How much galleon does this ice crystal wood wand need? As Mr. Ollivander said, the reason why the wands here are sold to young wizards for 7 gold galleons is because they are subsidized by Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and the Ministry of Magic. Otherwise, how could the price of a wand that accompanies a wizard throughout his life be less than 1/3 of the price of a magic book? Mr. Ollivander cleared his throat and said, the price of this ice crystal wood wand is 198 gold galleons, but because this unique ice crystal wood is provided by you, Miss Lowell, and the wand is made of new materials, it also gave me a lot of gains, so I only charge you 68 gold galleons. Irina was a little stunned when she heard Mr. Ollivander's words. Her family is only considered middle class and it is difficult to provide her with much money. For her, the price of 68 gold galleons is definitely not cheap. After all, according to the exchange rate of 1 to 5 gold galleons and pounds, 68 gold galleons are already equivalent to 340 pounds. Fortunately, Mr. Ollivander gave her a discount and did not charge her 198 gold galleons, otherwise her small treasury would not be able to produce so many gold galleons. Irina took out the gold galleons that she had saved from the textbook fee for Lockhart's defense against the dark arts class, counted 68 of them, and handed them to Mr. Ollivander. Thanks to Lockhart, I spent more than 100 gold galleons less. Irina put away her new wand and thought happily. When Irina got her own wand, Lynn had already found the house elf Gale who was waiting for her at the junction of Diagon Alley and Nocturne Alley, and returned to Roll Castle through Gale's apparition. Now there is only half a month left before the start of school. In these 10 days, Lynn practiced magic and alchemy during the day, and went to the streets of the Muggle world with his mother Rowena in the afternoon, which was very pleasant. And 3 days before the start of school, Lynn plunged into his study and spent an afternoon refining a wooden box. There were 2 locks hanging on the front of the wooden box, one of which felt slightly hot, while the other exudes a cold breath. These 2 locks were originally the most common combination locks in the Muggle world. Under the enchantment of Lynn's alchemy, they cannot be picked by magic or violence. The box will be completely locked and can no longer be opened. Of course, in order to prevent the wooden box itself from being damaged, Lynn also enchanted many defensive alchemy circles on the wooden box itself, so that even a powerful explosive spell could not explode the wooden box. However, what is this wooden box used for? Rowena asked with some confusion. It took Lynn an afternoon to tinker with such an unknown wooden box, which made Rowena a little strange. Lynn stuffed the locked wooden box into his school bag, spread his hands, and said, this is what I need after school starts, but unfortunately it takes too long, and I don't have time to go out today. We will make it early tomorrow morning. Let's go out, school is about to start, and I don't bother to cram. Rowena nodded happily. Time passed quickly, and soon came the day when school started. Lynn came to King's Cross Station through Gale's apparition, walked through the partition wall between the 9th platform and the 10th platform with a normal expression, and boarded the Hogwarts Express. Like the previous 2 times, he came to the innermost car of the train. After 10 minutes, Irina pushed open the door of this compartment and walked in. Good morning, Senior Luo. Irina greeted her, put down her luggage, and sat down on the seat opposite Lynn. After fighting side by side at the end of last year and buying books in Diagon Alley, the two seemed to be much more familiar than before. Not long after, Hermione and the Weasley twins also came to this carriage one after another, and the 5 of them just filled the carriage. Did we forget something? Irina glanced at the Hogwarts express train that was about to depart, and said with some doubts. She always felt like she had forgotten something. Have you brought all your textbooks and magic materials? Hermione helped Irina check. Irina checked the school bag, then lightly touched the obviously protruding pocket, and said with certainty, I have them all, and the young girl is also in my pocket. Then there should be nothing forgotten, right? Hermione scratched her head. Let's talk about it when you remember. Irina nodded. I guess it's not an important thing. The train started slowly, heading north. After a while, the fat woman selling snacks walked into the box pushing a trolley. As before, most of these snacks are purchased from Honeydukes. However, in the previous 2 school years, Lynn used the Marauders map to go to Hogsmeade Village with the Weasley twins. He was tired of some snacks from Honeydukes, so he only bought one to fill his stomach, belly of the crucible cake. Irina bought a lot of sweets and shared them with everyone. Thanks to Lockhart, I have money to buy snacks. While Hermione was immersed in eating, Irina winked at Lynn and whispered. Irina knew that Hermione was currently a fan of Lockhart, so Irina deliberately avoided her and did not let her hear that she was secretly arranging her idol. Hearing this, Lynn couldn't help laughing. But I don't think he cares. Lynn smiled and he whispered. Just as the 2 of them were flirting with each other, a burst of exclamation suddenly came from the car next door. And just when everyone was confused, Hermione also exclaimed, Look outside the window. Everyone immediately looked out of the car window, and saw a blue car flying side by side with the Hogwarts Express in the air, and Harry and Ron were in this flying car. However, things didn't look good for Harry. The flying car rolled and threw him out of the car. He was hanging in the air while holding on to the car door. This is the consequence of not wearing a seat belt. Driving irregularly makes loved ones burst into tears. Lynn couldn't help but shook his head. Hello, bike. At this time, Irina looked at Harry and Ron in the sky and couldn't help but exclaimed. She finally remembered that she had forgotten something before. She had forgotten about Harry and Ron, the 2 great enemies. Irina knew that Harry and Ron were magically sealed by the house elf Dobby to seal the passage between the 9th station and the 10th station, so they chose to take the flying car to catch the Hogwarts Express. During the summer vacation, she was still thinking about whether to take advantage of these 2 big grievances and let them board the Hogwarts Express train normally, but she didn't expect that the summer vacation was so much fun that she had long forgotten about it. Wingardium Leviosa. Irina quickly leaned out of the train window and cast a levitating spell on Harry. After getting the most suitable wand for herself, the power of all Irina's spells increased to a new level. Harry flew back to the car instantly under the influence of the levitating spell, even because Irina used too much force. Lee's head hit the roof of the car hard and hit a big bump. Fasten your seat belt, Irina shouted. Harry and Ron in the car heard Irina's words, and they quickly fastened their seat belts to avoid being thrown out by the wayward flying car again. How dare they? They will definitely be expelled by Professor McGonagall. It's over. Hermione was so anxious that she stamped her feet. Having read the laws of the wizarding world, she naturally understood how many rules Harry and Ron had violated. Although under the subtle influence of everyone last year, Hermione was no longer so resistant to breaking school rules. This time Harry and Ron violated not only school rules, but also the laws of the wizarding world. Seeing that her best friend was about to be expelled, how could Hermione not be anxious? Don't worry, as long as Professor Dumbledore is here, Harry and the others will not be expelled. Don't forget that we faced Voldemort 3 months ago and received praise from Professor Dumbledore. Even if the Ministry of Magic wants to expel Harry and the others, we also have to consider public opinion. Irina patted Hermione on the back and comforted her. With Irina's comfort, Hermione was not as anxious as before, but there was still a hint of worry on her face. Time passed by, and as the sun set, Hogwarts Castle gradually appeared in everyone's sight. The Hogwarts Express slowly came to a stop, and announcements asking the young wizards to change their wizarding robes also sounded in each carriage. On the other side, Ron drove the flying car into the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry like a flying monkey. At this moment, Ron found that the flying car seemed to be out of control and no longer listened to his command. It's falling towards the ground. You know, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, as the only magic school in the UK, has the most powerful security magic in the British wizarding world. If a flying car can easily drive into Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, then Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Hogwarts Castle was not safe either. Therefore, almost the moment the Fetian car drove in, the Fetian car was interfered by the powerful magic magnetic field. The terrifying magic power impacted the body of the Fetian car, causing most of the functions of the Fetian car to malfunction. No, stop, stop, Harry and Ron exclaimed. Right in front of them was the Whomping Willow planted in Hogwarts. However, the flying car that was disturbed by the magic power did not go as they wished. Under the desperate eyes of the two people, the flying car slammed into the Whomping Willow. Crack, there was a loud sound of metal colliding with trees. The flying car hit a thick tree trunk with Harry and Ron, and fell to the ground. The body of the flying car shook violently. Thick black smoke came out from under the deformed hood. Fortunately, the safety belt protected Harry from hitting the roof of the car again. "Are you okay, Ron?" Harry asked anxiously. Ron said with a trembling voice, "It's over. My wand. Look at my wand." The wand in Ron's hand was almost broken into two pieces by the previous impact, and the upper end of the wand drooped down, with only a few pieces of wood connected. Just when Harry wanted to continue talking, a violent impact was heard. The huge force was like a bull, deforming the car door beside Harry, causing Harry to hit Ron. Immediately afterwards, there was another violent impact. This time it was the roof of the car that was hit, and the entire roof of the Fetian sedan was dented by the violent impact. "What's going on?" Ron gasped and stared at the windshield. Harry turned his head just in time to see a branch as thick as a boa constrictor hit the glass. Harry finally saw the person who smashed the car. It was the tree that the car hit that was attacking them. Its trunk was bent into a bow shape, and its gnarled branches were hitting every part of the car that it could reach. Ron screamed as another twisted thick branch smashed a big hole into his car door. Countless twigs as thick as finger joints struck violently like hailstones, shaking the windshield and shaking. Branches as thick as battering rams were pounding frantically on the roof. Meanwhile, far outside the main entrance of Hogwarts Castle, a group of young wizards fell silent as they watched the scene of the Whomping Willow beating a car several hundred meters away. Dee taxi. Looking at this familiar scene, Lin En subconsciously swears, and secretly praises the Whomping Willow in his heart. At this time, the gate of the castle was opened, and the little wizards withdrew their gazes and walked into the castle in an orderly manner. On the Whomping Willow side, the flying car suddenly successfully launched, leading Harry and Ron out of the Whooping Willow's attack range. But then, Harry, Ron and the luggage they were carrying were thrown out by the flying car that seemed to have become a spirit. Then the flying car left the two of them and drove away into the distance. "Flying car, give the road a boost." Harry hugged Hedwig's cage with a confused look on his face. "This car seems to have a strong sense of self-management." Ron also froze in place, muttering in his mouth, "You said you were in automatic gear." After releasing the flying car, Harry and Ron dragged their luggage and walked towards the oak gate of the castle. The two of them approached the bright windows of the castle. At this time, this year's sorting ceremony had already begun in the auditorium. Countless candles stopped in midair, illuminating the four long tables surrounded by people, making the golden plates and goblets sparkle. The ceiling is star-studded, an enchanted ceiling that always reflects the sky outside. Looking past the dense black pointed wizard hats, Harry and Ron saw a long line of first-year students nervously entering the auditorium. Ron's sister Ginny was also among them. The red hair is very conspicuous. Meanwhile, Professor McGonagall was putting the sorting hat on the familiar corner stool. Wait, Harry sensed something was wrong. There's an empty seat on the teacher's bench. Where did Snape go? Hearing this, Ron also found that the seat that originally belonged to Professor Snape was empty at this time, and he said hopefully, maybe he's sick. Harry and Ron had always disliked Professor Snape, the way many primary and junior high school students disliked their procrastinating teachers. Harry also speculated maliciously. Maybe he left because he didn't become the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor. Ron nodded in agreement. Maybe he was fired. You know, everyone hates him. Maybe he's waiting to hear why you two didn't come to school on the Hogwarts Express. But at this moment, a terrified cold words came from behind the two of them, making them feel as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Harry and Ron felt their whole bodies stiffen. They turned their heads and saw Professor Snape, who was like a big black bat, looking at the two of them with sinister eyes. "Follow me," Professor Snape said coldly. As a result, Harry and Ron were slipped away by Professor Snape. In the auditorium, the sorting ceremony had ended. After standing up and delivering a speech, Professor Dumbledore announced the start of the opening dinner. The sound of clinking knives and forks resounded in the auditorium. Both freshmen and old students were grabbing various delicacies on their plates. The freshmen are enjoying this delicious food they have never seen before, while the old students who are more familiar with Hogwarts are grabbing the most sumptuous dinner that only happens 4 times a year. Back-to-school dinners, Halloween dinners, Christmas dinners and year-end dinners are all events that must not be missed for every little wizard who has stayed at Hogwarts Castle for a full year. At the Gryffindor table, Hermione had no appetite because she was worried about her 2 stupid sons, but Irina stuffed a large chicken drumstick into Hermione's mouth and let her chew it subconsciously. After the start-to-term dinner, Hermione was relieved to learn that Harry and Ron hadn't been expelled. The next day, Hermione was holding a jug of milk to sip, but with the sound of noise above her head, a grey owl fell into the milk jug in Hermione's arms with a slap. Milk splashed all over her face. "Errol!" Ron yelled when he saw the owl in the milk jug, and pulled the owl out with its milk-stained talons. Errol was slumped on the table, his legs dangling in the air, and a red envelope soaked in milk was still in his mouth. Hermione, who had milk splashed all over her face, wanted to go crazy, but after seeing the red envelope, she closed the mouth she had just opened, and then looked at Ron with sympathetic eyes. Hermione, who loves reading, has seen this kind of red envelope in the book, and she knows that Ron is going to be unlucky. "Oh, no," Ron wailed when he saw the red envelope. Harry asked, "What happened?" Ron said feebly, "My mother sent me a howler letter." "You'd better open it, Ron," Neville persuaded from the side. "It's even worse if you don't open it. My grandma sent it to me once, but I ignored it, and the result was terrible." Hearing Neville's words, Ron seemed to think of something and shuddered. Harry looked at the frightened expressions of several people and asked in confusion, "What is a roaring letter?" Before anyone could answer Harry's questions, the 4 corners of the roaring letter began to smoke. Ron stretched out his trembling hands and carefully tore open the envelope. Neville, Hermione and Irina quickly blocked their ears. A roar like an explosion came from the envelope. The huge sound seemed to tear down the roof, and Mrs. Weasley's roar resounded throughout the auditorium. Even Lynn, who was far away at the Slytherin table, subconsciously turned his gaze over after hearing the thunderous roar. "Ronald Weasley, you dared to steal a car. I wouldn't be surprised if they fired you. See how I deal with you then. You probably haven't thought about it at all. You and I, how did Dad feel when he found out that the car was gone?" Mrs. Weasley's roar made the plates and spoons on the table clatter, and all the little wizards in the auditorium turned to look at Ron, who was huddled in his chair with only red hair exposed. "I received Dumbledore's letter last night. Your father was so ashamed that he almost died. We worked hard to bring you up, but we didn't expect you to do such a thing. You and Harry almost lost their child. Life. Quote. It's so irritating. Your father will be scrutinized at work. It's all your fault. If you don't behave yourself, we'll take you back right away." Mrs. Weasley's roar finally stopped, but her voice was still buzzing in Ron's ears. The red envelope that had fallen from Ron's hand to the ground burned, curled up and turned into ashes. "I'm done." Ron held his head, feeling the death. Irina stood across Hermione and reached out to pat Ron on the shoulder. "My condolences." Harry on the side did not speak. Although his name was not mentioned in the yelling letter, he was still too guilty to eat. The first class in the morning was the herbal medicine class. When Irina came outside the greenhouse where the herbal medicine class was held, she spotted Lockhart walking with Professor Sprout. Professor Sprout didn't seem to be interested in Lockhart. She said with a sullen expression, "Today we will go to the 3rd greenhouse." After hearing Professor Sprout say the location of today's class, Irina quickly left Harry and others, bypassed the team and was the first to sneak into the 3rd greenhouse that Professor Sprout said. Just kidding, she didn't want to be like Harry and get away with Lockhart's conspicuous bag. When Irina entered the 3rd greenhouse, found a seat and sat down, and turned her eyes towards the door. She saw Harry being sneaked aside by Lockhart to lecture, pretending to be cool. By the time Harry returned to the greenhouse, Professor Sprout had already started today's lecture. We are going to repot the mandrake today. Can anyone tell me what the characteristics of the mandrake are? Hermione immediately raised her hand, and after receiving Professor Sprout's permission, she replied, Mandrake, also known as mandrake root, is the raw material of a powerful recovery agent, used to transform people who have been transformed or enchanted. The person who cast the curse returns to his original state. Professor Sprout happily gave Gryffindor 10 points, and then informed Mandrake that its cry was lethal. Everyone, please note that the mandrakes here are still very young, and what we have to do is to repot these young mandrakes. Professor Sprout pointed to about 100 mandrake seedlings lined up not far away. These mandrake saplings are purple-green and look very small. At the request of Professor Sprout, everyone put on earmuffs. Irina also specifically reminded Neville to check whether his earmuffs were properly worn, so as not to prevent Neville from hearing the mandrake sound like in the original book. Weeping and fainting. Although the cry of a mandrake seedling is not fatal, it can still cause great harm to the wizard. When Professor Sprout gave the order and everyone pulled out the mandrake seedlings, most of the little wizards let out an exclamation. Of course, no one could hear the exclamation due to the earmuffs. I saw that the thing pulled out from the soil was not a grass root, but a very ugly baby, and the leaves grew on the head of this baby. Its skin is light green with spots on it, and the mandrakes in the hands of these little wizards are obviously shouting at the top of their lungs. Ha! Irina let out a soft, hey. She found that the mandrake seedlings she pulled up in her hand did not cry like the mandrake seedlings in other people's hands, but was very quiet and curious. He looked at her carefully. Irina was a little confused. Why didn't this mandrake cry like the mandrakes in the hands of other little wizards? Hermione, lend me your mandrake. Irina signaled Hermione with her eyes and lifted the mandrake in her hand. What is surprising is that the mandrake in Hermione's hand, which was crying and kicking her legs, stopped crying after being caught by Irina, and began to look at Irina curiously. Lena. On the contrary, the very quiet mandrake in Irina's hand also started crying and fussing after Hermione took it. Can it be said that in addition to my affinity with the ice element, I also have an affinity with plants? Irina was a little surprised. She looked at the mandrake in her hand and said to herself. And at this moment, the young Bowtruckle climbed out of her backpack. She covered her ears with 2 branches-like fingers, and rubbed her head against Irina. Perhaps, it's the compatibility of animals and plants. Irina glanced at the green girl on her shoulder and thought so. Give Irina a boost. In fact, Irina's affinity for magical animals was originally set, but after thinking about it, it was still much inferior to Lin's alchemy, so an affinity for magical plants was added. After all, Chinese biting kale and venomous tentacles are no joke. Irina is very happy about her new ability. She finally understood why after seeing the group of Bowtruckles in the woods of the Scandinavian mountains that day, the group of Bowtruckles did not hide after seeing the wizard as recorded in the book, but instead curiously looking at herself. After feeding these Bowtruckles, Qingnu actively chose to follow her. It turns out that I have a special talent for attracting animals and plants. Irina thought so and happily stuffed the mandrake in her hand into the new earthen basin. When the mandrake in Hermione's hand saw that Irina had not planted herself, but instead planted the mandrake that originally belonged to Hermione, she suddenly collapsed and struggled in various ways, and Hermione was so scared that she quickly stuffed it. Enter the earthen basin. Mandrake larva. I was obviously the one who came first. After stuffing the mandrake larva into the earthen pot, the mandrake larva finally stopped struggling, which made Hermione sigh in relief. Poor mandrake, because he was not planted by Irina, he was so angry that he collapsed inside, crying and fussing, so pitiful. Hermione patted the soil on the basin and called it a day with satisfaction. After the herbal medicine class ended, Irina curiously looked at the poisonous tentacles behind Professor Sprout. After learning that she had a high affinity for plants, she no longer avoided dangerous magical plants like poisonous tentacles as before. However, just when Irina was about to step forward to investigate, she was pulled away by Hermione. Go back and take a shower. The next class is Transfiguration. Irina, you don't want to go to Professor McGonagall's class dirty. Hermione said. Irina was shocked and quickly followed Hermione back to the castle. You know, the time between the two major classes in the morning is not long. It is very comfortable for the boys to take a shower, but this time is a bit nervous for the girls. Professor McGonagall's class was not difficult. Irina, who was very talented in transfiguration, completed Professor McGonagall's class requirements on the first try, which earned Gryffindor another 5 points. The first class in the afternoon was Lockhart's defense against the dark arts class. Irina found that every Lockhart defense against the dark arts class on Hermione's timetable was circled with love by her. Poor baby, when you find out that your house has collapsed, you still don't know how it will collapse. Irina looked at Hermione with pity, which made Hermione feel confused. Soon, the defense against the dark arts class began. Lockhart walked into the classroom. Irina and Hermione sat in the front row of the classroom, while Harry and Ron sat in the back. In fact, Irina also wanted to sit in the back with Harry and the others, but Hermione said that good best friends should share the blessings and forced her to sit in the front row. At this time, under the gaze of Hermione, who was almost fainting with excitement, Lockhart walked into the classroom. He smiled confidently, showing a flash of white teeth. Just listen to Lockhart say, "I, Gilderoy Lockhart, a third-level Knight of the Order of Merlin, an honorary member of the Defense League Against the Dark Arts, and the winner of the Wizard Weekly Most Charming Smile Award 5 times, but I never hang that up. Speaking of words, I don't drive away the female ghosts of Wanloon by smiling." After Lockhart finished speaking, he glanced at the little wizards in the classroom, and at this moment, he found that Irina's desk in the first row was empty. "What's your name, classmate? Where is your textbook?" Lockhart came over and asked. "Irina Lowell. Sorry, Professor, I forgot to bring it," Irina said helplessly. Before Lockhart's true identity was revealed, it would undoubtedly be unwise to confront him directly, and it might even make her the target of Lockhart's little fans. She didn't buy Lockhart's book. She originally wanted to hide in the back, but Hermione pulled her to the front row. Hermione also looked at her with some doubts. Irina didn't seem like the kind of person who forgot her book. "It's okay, Miss Lovell, remember to bring it next time. After all, I will always forgive some beautiful ladies, won't I?" Seeing the embarrassed Irina, Lockhart showed his white teeth again and said with a smile. After walking back to his original position, Lockhart announced, "Next, I will give everyone a paper and take a short test. Don't be afraid, I just want to see how you read and understand." "How many?" After getting her paper, Irina looked at the question that filled 3 pages. 1. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite color? 2. What is Gilderoy Lockhart's secret ambition? 3. What do you think is Gilderoy Lockhart's greatest achievement to date? 54. When is Gilderoy Lockhart's birthday? What would be his ideal birthday gift? Looking at the densely packed topics related to Lockhart, Irina fell silent again. After half an hour, Lockhart collected the papers and began to correct them on the spot. When picking up the paper, Lockhart immediately took out Irina's paper and said with a smile, "Okay, Miss Lowell, although you forgot to bring your textbook today, I think you should be serious. Read my book and let me see how many points you can get." Hearing Lockhart's words, Irina seemed to have a bad premonition. She covered her face and buried her head in her arms. "It's over. The society is dead." Just as Irina was trying to bury herself like an ostrich, Lockhart's voice sounded in the classroom. "Why do you say my favorite color is girly pink? That color should only be liked by girls, right? Haven't you watched A Year with XZ Snowman carefully? I mentioned that my favorite color is girly pink. Love the lilac color. What? Why do you say my secret ambition is to use my own line of lotions to grow hair on you-know-who's bald head? Last question, you said my ideal birthday gift is Merlin's fishnet stockings. If you really read my book, you should be able to see my ideal birthday in Chapter 12 of Wandering with Werewolves. The gift is the harmony of all magical and non-magical beings, as I explicitly mentioned." Lockhart read it question after question, and by the time he got to the last question, he was almost out of breath. Among the 54 questions, the only one Irina got right was, Gilderoy Lockhart has won the Wizard Weekly Most Charming Smile Award several times. The answer to this question was the one Lockhart had just given. I mentioned it when I introduced myself. Except for this question, Irina will give some weird answers to almost every question. For example, Gilderoy Lockhart once received a mysterious two-hole electric socket given by a werewolf. So you haven't read my book at all, have you, Miss Lowell? Lockhart looked at Irina and asked. Facing the eyes of the entire classroom, Irina had no choice but to lie and say that her book had been stolen. For this obvious lie, the narcissistic Lockhart believed it. He nodded and said, "Yeah, who doesn't like Gilderoy Lockhart's books? Maybe some little guy the thief admired me too much, but couldn't afford my books, so he finally set his sights on poor Miss Lowell. It seems that being admired is also a mistake." Lockhart closed his eyes, put his hands on his head and brushed his hair, pretending to be cold at the height. When Lockhart opened his eyes, he saw Irina's sad expression. He concluded that the other person was sad because she lost his book, and he thought that the other person was also one of his little crushes. So, Lockhart looked at Irina and said, "As your defense against the dark arts professor, after careful consideration, I decided to give you a set of my books, Miss Lowell." Irina said helplessly, "Thank you so much, Professor." As everyone knows, her sadness at the moment has nothing to do with Lockhart's book. Irina's sadness is purely because she was so confused in the entire classroom. "Lockhart, why do you have to read out the answers to every question?" Irina wanted to cry but had no tears. Lockhart waved his wand. Although his magic level might not be as good as that of a fifth-year wizard, he could still cast the simplest levitating spell. A set of Lockhart's books floated up from his podium and landed on Irina's desk. After giving Irina his own books, Lockhart began to mark other people's papers. In the end, Hermione was the only one in the entire classroom who got full marks, which made Lockhart add 10 points to Gryffindor. "Now, back to business. Be careful, I am here to teach you to defend yourself against the most evil things known to the wizarding world. You will face the most terrifying things in this classroom. But remember, as long as I am here, no harm will come to you. All I ask is that you remain calm." Lockhart bent down and took out a large cage covered with a cloth from behind the podium and placed it on the table. "I must ask you not to scream, that will irritate them," Lockhart said, lifting the hood. "I saw a group of ugly elves appearing in this cage. These elves were iron green, about 8 inches tall, with small pointed faces and very shrill and harsh voices." Lockhart looked proud and announced, "Yes, the Cornish elf just caught." Seeing these elves, the boys in the classroom couldn't help but sneer. "Scariest thing. That's it. This is probably what the little wizards are thinking. You know, when Professor Green served as the defense against the dark arts professor at Hogwarts 2 years ago, the teaching material for the first class given to the first-year students was the Acromantula with a danger level of XXXXX. Although Irina was I have never listened to Professor Green's courses, but I have heard about them from my seniors. Compared with the Acromantula with a danger level of XXXXX, the Cornish elf is nothing at all. But Lockhart said that they are the most evil creatures in the world, which is really ridiculous." Seeing the young wizards looking down on them, Lockhart was also a little annoyed. He just heard him say, "Okay, let's see how you deal with them." Lockhart said and opened the cage door directly. The Cornish elves that escaped from their cages were jumping up and down throughout the classroom like wild horses, causing havoc. Some Cornish elves smashed the windows and scattered broken glass all over the back row of the classroom. Some Cornish elves grabbed the ink bottle on the little wizard's desk and scattered it everywhere in the classroom. Some Cornish elves tore the pictures on the wall and the waste bins on the ground into pieces, and even threw some little wizards' school bags and textbooks out. The little wizards in the classroom are only in 2nd grade, and their spell-casting abilities are extremely limited. Even if the Cornish elves are not a big threat, they are not something they can easily deal with today. Perhaps these little wizards all have the ability to challenge the Cornish elves alone, but when faced with the attacks of these Cornish elves, they had to hide under the table. At this time, Lockhart saw that the situation was almost over, and planned to control these Cornish elves, but he waved his wand and shouted loudly, "Peshipixi Pesternomi." However, before he could fully cast the spell, a Cornish elf snatched the wand from his hand and threw it out of the window. In the first row of the classroom, Irina and Hermione continued to use magic spells to repel the Cornish elves who dared to attack them. These Cornish elves found that Irina and Hermione were not easy to mess with. After that, they turned around to bully other little wizards, which created a vacuum zone around Irina and Hermione without the Cornish elves. Ice field. Looking at the Cornish elves making trouble everywhere, Irina was also a little annoyed. She pointed her wand towards the ground and shouted. I saw an icy blue halo released from the wand, and then continuously expanded in all directions. All the Cornish elves affected by this icy blue halo were frozen into ice sculptures, and the halo, the internal space, was also affected by the magic power of the ice element, and the temperature dropped rapidly. In a few seconds, the entire defense against the dark arts classroom seemed to be turned into an ice bank. Even the little wizards who were not attacked by Irina's spell felt cold all over. After all, the temperature in the classroom at this moment is probably below -10 degrees Celsius. This spell called Ice Field is a variant developed by Irina when she was researching the freezing spell, and her idea came from the Eternal Ice Palace that was inadvertently released at Ollivander's wand shop that day. Magic in general. The original freezing spell is a single target control spell issued in the form of a beam of light, but Irina changed its release method to be released in the form of an energy wave, so that the original single target attack spell becomes a kind of magic spell of area group control. If I can reach a higher level of magical power in the future, I'm afraid I can really release the Eternal Ice Palace that appeared in Ollivander's wand shop at will. Irina looked at the Cornish elves who turned into ice sculptures and fell around her, thinking this in her heart. When releasing the ice domain, Irina intentionally or unintentionally unrestricted the release of ice elemental magic towards Lockhart, which caused Lockhart to turn into an ice sculpture almost like those Cornish elves. At this time, the get-out-of-class bell rang. These little wizards couldn't bear the low temperature in the classroom and ran out of the classroom one after another. Sorry, Professor, I may not have controlled my magic power well. Please wait here for a while. The freezing effect will be lifted after the magic power dissipates, Irina said to Lockhart, apologizingly. Then, she dragged Hermione, who looked puzzled, out of the classroom. Irina, you can obviously break Professor Lockhart's curse directly. After leaving the classroom, Hermione looked at Irina suspiciously. Irina spread her hands and said, he has so much adventure experience, he must be a wizard with a high level of magic. I'm afraid he will break the curse by himself as soon as we leave. Why do I need to bother me? If you really break the curse for him, that means you don't trust him, do you understand? Hermione looked suddenly enlightened. She nodded vigorously and said, yes, with Professor Lockhart's unfathomable strength, it is definitely just a matter of waving a hand to break the curse on yourself. So the two returned to the Gryffindor common room, talking and laughing. Only this ice sculpture that looked like Lockhart was left, shivering from the cold in the air-conditioned classroom. The next day, the first class of the morning was the defense against the dark arts class for the third-year Slytherins and Gryffindors. Lynn came to the classroom. He walked straight to the last row and flipped through the alchemy books. In Lynn's opinion, there is no real material to be learned from Lockhart anyway, so he might as well read his own alchemy books. Not long after, Lockhart came to the classroom. Lockhart's appearance at this time caught Lynn's attention. I saw that in this hot summer, Lockhart was wrapped in a thick velvet coat, wearing velvet gloves and a hood. A string of mucus flowed from Lockhart's nose, accompanied by Lockhart's utterance from time to time, sneezing sound. Lockhart's ears were blowing out thick smoke like a steam train. It was obvious that Lockhart had just taken a refreshing drug to treat a cold. Seeing Lockhart's strange appearance, Lynn couldn't help but be confused. At this time, Lockhart on the podium was secretly thinking something bad. He had also heard the conversation between Irina and Hermione when they left the classroom yesterday. Lockhart originally wanted to seek help from Irina to resolve the curse, but after learning of Irina's thoughts, he gave up asking for help because of his pride. In the end, he froze in this classroom for 2 full hours before the curse was lifted with a "Stop curse" by Professor McGonagall, who was passing by. But even so, he still caught a cold from the cold, and it was a very serious cold. After all, no one can stay healthy without getting sick after being frozen into an ice sculpture for 2 hours. I, Gilderoy Lockhart, sneeze. Sir Merlin, sneeze. Order of the 3rd class, Dark Arts, sneeze. Honorary member of the Defense League, sneeze, 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 sneeze. Lockhart wanted to introduce himself, but he sneezed several times while speaking, and his speech was interrupted by the flying nose. Reluctantly, Lockhart had no choice but to give up promoting his great achievements, and began to hand out test papers to the little wizards while sneezing. Looking at the parchment in front of him that seemed to be stained with snot, a look of disgust flashed in Lin's eyes. He moved to the side, farther away from the parchment. Obviously it was you who did something good, but I was the one who was disgusted. Lin was a little helpless. Thinking of Lockhart's current situation, and the only class Lockhart had yesterday was the second-year Gryffindor and Slytherin Defense Against the Dark Arts class, Lin could already guess it was revealed who was responsible for Lockhart's illness. In the next half hour, Lockhart's sneezing sound on the podium did not stop, which made Lin uneasy even while reading alchemy books. Half an hour later, Lockhart came down from the podium and began to collect papers. When he received the last row, Lockhart was stunned and asked, "Mr. Roll, why are all your papers empty?" Lin flipped through the alchemy books and said concisely, "I haven't read it, I don't know." Seeing Lin's natural expression, Lockhart was stunned. Although this was his first time teaching, he had never seen such a confident student who had not studied. Lockhart asked, "Why didn't you read my book? Don't you know that today is my Defense Against the Dark Arts class?" Lin spread his hands and said innocently, "Because I didn't buy it." At this moment, not only Lockhart, but the entire classroom fell into silence. In this wave, Lin played a key group control. Lockhart felt that he had never been so speechless in his life. He asked, "Why didn't you buy a book? I remember that the Hogwarts list clearly stated that these books of mine are the textbooks for this year's Defense Against the Dark Arts class." Even if he lost the Lowell storybook from the previous class, as a qualified idol, it was very reasonable for him to give the little fangirl a set of his own books. But this Luoer didn't even cover up. Lin put down the alchemy book in his hand, looked at Lockhart, and said, "I would like to ask Professor Lockhart, why are those novels used as Defense Against the Dark Arts textbooks? I think they don't seem to be able to help us. Refining our knowledge of Defense Against the Dark Arts, does it mean that Professor Lockhart, you came to Hogwarts to teach just to promote your own books?" Following Lin's words, all the little wizards in the classroom turned their attention to Lin and Lockhart. Some of Lockhart's brainless fans were looking at Lin with angry eyes, thinking that Lin should not insult their idol like this, while the boys and some smart girls began to think about it, and they looked at him questioningly. Looked at Lockhart. Lockhart's head turned rapidly, and soon he thought of his speech. Lockhart said righteously, "Mr. Roll, you shouldn't slander a professor like this. I naturally have my own reasons for choosing these books as teaching materials. I will incorporate the knowledge of these teaching materials into my courses so that everyone can immersively experience the beauty of Defense Against the Dark Arts." Before Lockhart could speak, Lin interrupted expressionlessly, "I'm sorry, Professor Lockhart, I would like to ask you, do you mean the knowledge integrated into the textbook and the immersive experience? What you want is to perform a sitcom in the classroom, right?" Lockhart was stunned. "How did you know?" At this time, Lockhart was in a dilemma. As Lin said, his so-called method of integrating textbooks into the classroom was to let the little wizards come on stage to cooperate with him to play the various roles in the book, and staged sitcoms for the little wizards. After yesterday's Defense Against the Dark Arts class, Lockhart fully realized that he had no ability to deal with those dark creatures, so he planned to put the class in his home field, that is, in his own books, so as to avoid himself insufficient level of magic. Lockhart, who had been exposed in his mind, no longer had the intention to entangle with Lin. He hastily said, "The professor naturally has the idea of a professor, don't worry about Mr. Laurel. It doesn't matter if you don't have my book. It's just a pity that Mr. Roll can't fully experience the beauty of Defense Against the Dark Arts class like other little wizards." Seeing Lockhart flinch, Lin smiled and did not continue speaking, giving Lockhart a step down. Soon, the bell rang, and Lockhart left the classroom as if running away. Lin shook his head, put his alchemy books into his backpack, then stood up and left. Unlike Irina, who is only excellent in magic, Lin now has extremely high attainments in both magic and alchemy, and he no longer needs to endure development as he did in the first and second grades. After all, he can single-handedly kill an elite Auror in terms of magic level, and in terms of alchemy, no one in the entire British magic world can beat him except Professor Dumbledore. Even in the French magic world, which is rich in alchemists, Lin can't enough to rank in the first echelon. Therefore, facing a deceitful guy like Lockhart, Lin didn't have to pretend to be an ordinary student like facing Quirrell, wasting his time in such useless classes. If you have this time, you might as well read one or two more alchemy books. Soon, Lynn returned to the Slytherin dormitory. The Malfoy trio are not in the dormitory at this time, because the Malfoy trio and Lynn are not in the same grade, so their curriculum arrangements are also different, just like Lynn has no class at this time, while the Malfoy trio the group had to go to the dungeon for potions class. However, this also has certain advantages. Lynn can know the whereabouts of Irina and others through Malfoy's class schedule. After all, Gryffindors in the same grade often attend classes with Slytherins. It's time. Lynn took out an exquisite alchemy wooden box from the desk drawer. This alchemy wooden box was the box he specially made before school started. There were 2 locks on the opening of the box, one for cold and one for heat. After a year, both Lynn and Irina have long since believed in their hearts that the other person is also a time traveler. But the two have always been tacit, and neither of them has spoken out to expose the other's identity as a time traveler. This kind of inseparable companionship has been maintained for a whole year. Now, Lynn N decided to take the initiative to break this invisible barrier. As for the alchemy wooden box in Lynn's hand, it was Lynn's final test of Irina. Lynn left the dormitory with the box and headed towards the Gryffindor common room in Gryffindor Tower. Outside the portrait of the fat lady, Lynn stopped a 4th and 5th grade Gryffindor girl and said, "Sister, can you help me deliver this box to Irina of Gryffindor?" When the Gryffindor girl saw Lynn, she was stunned and asked, "I remember you. You are Lynn Rohr, right?" At the year-end banquet last year, Professor Dumbledore added points for Lynn and Irina at the same time, and the story of the two repelling Voldemort's remnant spirit was also widely spread among the little wizards of the 2nd grade and above, so this name the Gryffindor girls recognized Lynn. After Lynn admitted, the Gryffindor girl took the alchemy wooden box from Lynn's hand, nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will hand it over to Irina." After handing over the alchemy wooden box, Lynn returned to the Slytherin dormitory to practice alchemy, intending to review the alchemy skills he learned from Mr. Green during the summer vacation. For Lynn today, he has plenty of time. Lynn is already a 3rd-year student at Hogwarts this year and needs to take elective courses to continue her studies. Lynn didn't intend to enroll in all 12 courses like Hermione did. In his opinion, it was better to spend more time focusing on a few abilities than to study extensively but not learn any of them thoroughly. Therefore, in addition to the 7 compulsory courses of Transfiguration, Herbal Medicine, Defense Against the Dark Arts, Potions, Charms, Astronomy and History of Magic, Lynn only took the Ancient Runes as an elective course. For Lynn, an alchemist, the Ancient Runes course at Hogwarts was no different from a self-study course. After all, the knowledge taught in the Ancient Runes course was necessary for Lynn when he started alchemy 2 years ago, and it has already been deeply imprinted in his mind. Even Professor Bathsheba Babylon, who is responsible for teaching Ancient Runes courses, may not have as many Ancient Runes as Lynn N. Compared with other young wizards who have taken many elective courses, Lynn does not need to run up and down the various classrooms in the castle every day, and because the existence of elective courses affects the professor's class schedule, the original 7 courses, the number of hours per week of compulsory courses has been greatly reduced. The reduction in classes allowed Lynn to have enough time to study alchemy every week. As time went by, it soon came time for lunch. The little wizards went to the auditorium to eat, and after the luncheon, these little wizards returned to their respective common rooms for a lunch break. Irina reported the Gryffindor password to the fat lady's portrait, and then took Hermione's little hand and walked into the Gryffindor common room. Just when Irina was about to return to the dormitory, a senior Gryffindor sister stopped her. "Lowell, this is what Roel asked me to hand over to you." With that said, the Gryffindor senior handed the alchemy wooden box to Irina. "Did Senior Luoer give me something?" "Okay, thank you, Senior." Irina quickly thanked her, and then looked at the alchemy wooden box in her hand. She was still smiling at first, but after seeing the 5 strange yet familiar fonts on the alchemy wooden box, she trembled all over, and then turned pale with fright. On the front of this alchemy wooden box, golden lines outline 5 beautiful fonts. These are words that Hermione, Harry and Ron cannot understand, but Irina is very familiar with. These are 5 Chinese characters, and these 5 characters are BJ Olympics. After seeing these 5 Chinese characters, Irina understood everything. As she had guessed before, Lynn was indeed a time traveler and came from the ancient East just like her. However, they have obviously been tacitly understanding each other for a year, so why did Lin En choose to expose it? Irina was thinking a lot, and she looked at the alchemy wooden box in her hand at a loss. She understood that these 5 Chinese characters were the key to opening these 2 locks, but once she opened these 2 locks, it was equivalent to Irina taking the initiative to tell Lin, yes, I am a time traveler too. To be honest, she wasn't ready to be honest with the other person because she wasn't sure yet about what the other person was thinking. Faced with someone who came from the same place as herself and had similar special abilities, how did Lin En view her? A fellow countryman who could become a good friend? Or is it a hidden threat that needs to be eliminated? Thinking of this, Irina's lips turned white. Irina, what's wrong with you? Seeing that Irina looked strange, Hermione quickly shook her and asked anxiously. Looking at the anxious eyes of her best friend, Irina shook her head and said reluctantly, I'm fine. I want to go back to the dormitory alone and have some quiet time. You and Harry can chat together. After saying that, Irina headed towards the girls' dormitory. Although Hermione was a little confused, she still gave Irina her own space, and she watched Harry and Ron play wizard chess absently in the Gryffindor common room. At this time, Irina had already returned to the bedroom. Although it was lunch break time, most of the little wizards in Gryffindor would choose to spend their noon in the common room, so there was no one else in the dormitory except Irina. Irina placed the alchemy wooden box on her desk. She looked at the alchemy wooden box in front of her with a complicated expression. She didn't know whether she should open it or not. If she did, in what capacity would she face Lin later? Never mind. Sooner or later, Irina chose to break the jar and break the jar. Anyway, what is supposed to come will come, and the ending will not be changed whether the alchemy wooden box is opened or not. Irina turned her attention to the 5 Chinese characters again and thought about the clues to unlock the lock. After a while, Irina hesitated to pick up the hot combination lock, and adjusted the scrambled Arabic numerals on the combination lock to the order of 2008. Click. The combination lock shook lightly, and it opened. Really, Irina cheered up, and it seemed that her thinking was not wrong. She picked up another combination lock that exuded cold air, and adjusted the scrambled Arabic numerals on the combination lock into the order of 2022. Click. The second lock was also opened. Irina opened the alchemy wooden box with anxiety and looked inside the wooden box. A pendant shining golden under the light was fixed in the center of the wooden box, and a letter written on parchment was pressed under the pendant. Irina picked up the pendant. This pendant was made of crystal, and inside the crystal seemed to be sealed a golden liquid exuding pleasant magic fluctuations. Elixir of Fortune. Irina recognized the liquid sealed inside the crystal. Yes, this Felicity Elixir crystal pendant was bought by Lin from a French potion master with a defective alchemy failed magic scepter on the trading platform of Magic Gold Street in France during the summer vacation of the 1st grade. Although there is only a small spoonful of the elixir sealed inside the crystal, the value of the elixir and the crystal pendant themselves make it a particularly suitable gift. Immediately afterwards, Irina picked up the envelope that was originally pressed under the crystal pendant. Lin's handwriting was on the letter. I think that your willingness to open this box means that you have made enough preparations. After the dinner, I will wait for you in the abandoned classroom where the Mirror of Arised was placed last year. I hope to be able to wait for your arrival. Of course, if you are willing to. Irina bit her lip. Of course she remembered the room where the Mirror of Arised was placed last year. From the few words in Lin En's letter, Irina understood that he had no ill intentions towards her, which made Irina very happy. After all, it is definitely a wonderful thing to be able to meet one's fellow countrymen in another world, isn't it? Although I have experienced different things, lived a different life, and traveled through time for different reasons. But they all came here in the end, and they all had a chance to choose a new life. This is wonderful, isn't it? Different paths, same destination. Irina carefully put on the crystal pendant containing the elixir, and a smile appeared on her face again. Back in the common room, Hermione looked at Irina in surprise. She noticed the pendant on Irina's chest. Irina, where did this pendant come from? Irina chuckled, leaned against Hermione, and said comfortably, a gift from a friend. Hermione chuckled lightly and said, it was given by Senior Roll, right? In that wooden box. How do you know? Irina was taken aback. Hermione said helplessly. you just went in with the wooden box sent by Senior Roll, and when you came out, you had an extra pendant on your body. Anyone can guess who it is. Irina was not convinced and argued. I bet Harry and Ron can't guess it. Harry and Ron, who were suddenly queued not far away, looked over in confusion, not understanding what they were talking about. Seeing her two stupid sons, Hermione slapped herself on the forehead. In the 2 classes in the afternoon, Irina was much more active than usual, and her continuous answers to questions earned her more than 20 points for Gryffindor again. The dinner time came soon, but when Irina came to the auditorium, she found that Lynn, who had no class in the afternoon, had already finished dinner and left. You can't live up to the delicious food. Although Irina was a little impatient, she still filled her stomach honestly. Hermione, you go back first. I have something to go out for. I'll come back later. After filling her stomach, Irina said to Hermione and the other 3. Harry and Ron were not suspicious. They were eager to return to the Gryffindor common room to play wizard chess. Hermione, on the other hand, gave Irina a strange look before leaving with Harry. After watching Harry and the 3 leave the auditorium, Irina walked towards the abandoned classroom where the Mirror of Arised was placed in her memory last year. Although she had followed Harry all the way to the abandoned classroom, Irina had deliberately memorized the route along the way, so she found the way easily and came outside the abandoned classroom. Glancing at the opened classroom door of the abandoned classroom, Irina swallowed and walked inside. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.